Reborn. Evolving from Nothing Chapters 141 to 150. Chapter 141. Treasure. Whoosh. Golden light flashed before Dorian's eyes as he felt the world around him stretch once more. All this teleporting is starting to get old, he thought, trying to push his mind off the horrifying vision of the future he had just witnessed. Euclid's logs were explicit that the first trial merely offered a possible future. It wasn't a certain future, only something that could happen. But how? Dorian thought as he teleported, his thoughts racing. No, I already know, don't I? He finished the thought as he finished teleporting, blinking his eyes furiously. He had arrived in a large, stone hallway. The floor was covered with a long, patterned red and gray carpet. The walls had large, colorful stained glass windows leaking in light. The hallway behind him ended in a dead end, while off in front of him it ended in a large, glowing opening that he couldn't see through. It's you. Dorian spat out loud, his eyes growing steely. Euclid. Deep in the farthest recesses of his mind, Dorian felt the darkness that was Euclid's memories and presence seemed to stir. No being could live and stay sane with you in them. I can sense your touch on my mind, Dorian thought, clutching at his head. His memories flashed through him. One, in particular, appeared once more. The memory of him killing several hunters for torturing a deer, back on the world bridge to Blizzeria. Was that a crime worthy of death? No, Dorian didn't think so. Perhaps a crime worthy of a beating, given the lawless nature of these lands, alongside a transformation into a fierce, monstrous-looking beast to terrify them into changing their ways. But he could have solved that incident through a number of methods. Yet he had chosen to kill them. I've already started down this path, Dorian realized, looking down at his now trembling hands. Euclid was not evil. He did not want to murder freely or wantonly. He was simply extremely passionate and driven. When Euclid's extreme passion and drive combined with Dorian's own sense of justice, it was distorted to an extreme. If I don't get rid of you, that will be me in the future, Dorian realized, nodding his head. I will become a monster that destroys reality. He took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down, clenching his fists. I will not allow that. This was the only reality Dorian had now. If Euclid was to be believed, and despite their antagonistic relationship, Dorian knew his words had been true. This was the only reality Dorian had ever had. He would not allow it to be destroyed by his own hand. Welcome, Challenger. You have successfully passed the door of splendor. You have been placed in front of that which you most desire in these ruins. As Dorian was thinking over his worries and plots, Asra No. 2's voice echoed in his head, informing him of where he was. You are now standing in one of the entrance hallways to the main treasure depository. Dorian's eyes widened. He looked down the hallway, where a large stone entrance opened to a glowing doorway. Right down there, he began to move. He took a few calm steps, but then broke out into a jog, and then into a sprint. This was it, the culmination of all his good intentions, all his hard work, all his efforts. Whoosh! Dorian moved through the glowing entrance, and found himself in a golden hall. An enormous, soaring grand hall with a ceiling that must have reached 100 meters high, full of treasure. Huge piles of silver and gold, magic artifacts that glowed with energy, rare pills that flashed with light. He saw a silver set of plate armor that was covered in black carvings, vibrating faintly. He saw a green lance that rested quietly but gave off a slightly ominous, powerful aura. He saw a set of golden whips, sparkling with pure white light. Treasures of all sorts and kinds could be seen, in the tens of hundreds of thousands. Yes, Dorian fist pumped the air, excitement flooding him as he managed to push past the vision of the future, focusing on the present. He had found the treasure. He could save Will. Calm down there, kiddo. As Dorian was celebrating, looking around the grand hall, a gruff voice called out from the side. Dorian turned to the side, starting. He was not alone in the grand treasure hall. The hall was large, stretching roughly 100 meters wide, and easily 500 meters long. The ceiling was arched, with long crystals dripping down from it, giving off bright warm light that lit the hall. There was a large door at one end of the hall, a resplendent golden door that looked almost identical to the door of splendor. Gathered around this door were several figures. Species: human. Class: Lord, Pseudo-King. Maximum energy level: 103,939. Species: True vampire. Class. Lord, middle. Maximum energy level. 69,321. Species. Human. Class. Lord, late. Maximum energy level. 89,112. Two humans and vampire were currently sitting down atop small piles of treasure. Each of them had a pensive, tired expression as they looked over at a human that was wearing a long, black robe. The human had a ridiculous hairstyle that was clearly dyed black, in the shape of what looked like a giant chess piece, that of a knight. The oddly dressed fellow was looking right at Dorian, a superior expression on his face. What? Dorian stared in confusion. Species. Human. Class. King, early. Maximum energy level. 306,689. He's a king class human? Really? Dorian shook his head as he looked at the eccentric man. Like I said, calm down, kiddo. I got here before you, just wait for the voice to appear in your head. The man with the chess piece for hair said, nodding his head sharply. His voice was gruff and deep, at odds with his eccentric and slightly feminine appearance. Are you talking to me? Dorian patted himself on the chest. The man rolled his eyes. His body seemed to blur as he leapt through the air of the grand hall, landing down next to Dorian with a thud. Obviously, he shook his head as if Dorian was an idiot. A moment later, a voice went off in Dorian's head, almost as if it had been waiting for a moment to break into the conversation. Welcome to the main treasure depository. Asra number 2 spoke in his head, her voice cheerful. In here lie all the treasures we gathered after defeating the vile beast, the Emperor of Demons. The Emperor had treasures and valuables gathered from thousands of nations, looted and stolen, pilfered or commissioned. Veritable mountains of wealth lie in here, enough to displace the economy of any major power. She regaled Dorian with a tale of the history of the treasure room. His eyes shined brighter as he heard this. With what was in here, there was no chance he wouldn't be able to revive Will. Every treasure you see within here is for the taking, Challenger. Asra number 2 began and the continued. However, the treasures you take all come with a price. There is no free lunch in this world. There is one entrance to the main treasure depository. The leaving door, a door which holds the second trial of the Ascension ruins for those that have ended up here. Asra number 2 paused for a moment before continuing. Take with you what you want, but to pass through the leaving door and arrive in the castle proper of the Ascension ruins, be prepared. The more treasure you take with you, the harder a trial you shall face. Asra number 2's message passed to Dorian's mind in an instant. He processed it all in a few seconds, pausing as he thought it over. Ah, you've gotten the message then. The stranger with the weird haircut rudely interrupted Dorian's thoughts, his voice imperious. Can I help you? Dorian politely said, keeping any irritation from his voice. His body was exhausted, and the last thing he needed right now was a fight. The black-robed man seemed to take that as an acceptance of his words, puffing his chest up with a smile. No, I am one of the Bold brothers, Daryl Bold, from the A-ranked mercenary team Black Chess. If there was something I needed help on, a weak Lord-class fighter like yourself would be no help. The King-class wizard seemed to have gauged Dorian's current strength accurately. His energy level put him on the weaker side of Lord class. However, you should realize your limits, kiddo. Even I can't escape this damn room with anything of real value. Daryl went on. That door is no joke. The more treasure or more valuable treasure you take with you, the heavier it becomes, and only one person can pass through it at a time. Just some advice to a fellow challenger. Thank you for the advice. Dorian gave him a calm nod, having fully regained control of his emotions. He then immediately began walking off towards one of the piles of treasure. The man snorted, shaking his head in irritation. The oddly shaped hair on top of his head wobbled as he turned away, stalking towards the door. Despite his rather rude attitude, he actually didn't seem to have bad intentions. At the least, he didn't try to kill or rob Dorian, which was a big plus in his book. Tap. Euclid's journal once more appeared in Dorian's hands as he walked. He began to skim through it, eventually finding a short passage about this room. The main treasure depository finished construction today. A basic challenge to fit those that seek grand treasures or great wealth. Leaving it is one of the easier trials, but for those who merely seek wealth, there is no need to test their mettle further. As long as they have the strength to bear the treasure they hold, who am I to stop them? The trial he was facing, and the room around him, despite all of its grand value, seemed to be worth barely a footnote in Euclid's eyes. To Dorian, however, the passage sounded like a hymn from the heavens. If there wasn't much other work put into this room, then it's more likely than not I don't need to leave the hall to use the treasures, right? He thought as he picked up one treasure that caught his eye, a lightweight silver rapier that was about half a meter long in length, elegantly crafted from metal. He tapped on the tip of it, sending a sliver of energy from his soul spell matrix into it. Whoosh! Immediately, a bright silver light shot from the rapier, extending about 2 meters. The light was tight and slim, but felt dangerous, as if it could melt through Dorian's skin if he left it near it long enough. A second later, that light dampened as the magic energy the rapier was giving off was forced to weaken, fizzling off into nothingness. There appears to be some type of dampening field weakening most artifacts, perhaps? Dorian reached a conclusion of sorts. His spatial ring seemed to be working fine, but that might be because it used very little energy. He went and tried out a few other artifacts, getting similar results. Well, I can't use any of the treasures, that's true. He shrugged. But I don't need to use them, do I? He smiled evilly. I just need to absorb them. He picked up the silver rapier, holding it in his hand. Absorb. Whoosh. Immediately, Dorian felt a store of energy flood into his veins, partially restoring some of his spent energy. Wise Jade Dragon. Growth stage, 3/5, Young Jade Dragon. Growth progress 358,992 421,881. Only around 2,800 points. Not bad, but nothing too great. He looked at his increased progress, nodding his head as the silver rapier fell into dust. A huge grin forced its way onto his face as he looked at the huge mountains of treasures that covered the giant hall. And then dived right into the middle of the one next to him. And madly began to absorb. Meanwhile, as Dorian swam beneath mountains of treasure, absorbing everything that came within reach, several other people had just finished their own Door of Splendor first trials. I will be taken to that which I desire most in the ruins. Helena said, her voice pale and fraught, her eyes drawn and tired, as she looked at the Door of Splendor before her. Ha, I doubt I can be taken to that which I truly want. She sighed, her face downcast. How I wish you were here, Dorian. She hesitated for a second before she laid her hand on the door, teleporting instantly. That was unpleasant. Leader's cheerful pride was nowhere to be found as he somberly looked at the door in front of him, his entire body covered in sweat. To that which I desire? Well, that is the best news I've heard since I had to live that horrid dream. Leader's customary cheer began to return as he heard Osra No. 2 speak in his head. Great Lord, your humble servant shall rejoin you shortly. Leader threw his body at the door with abandon, vanishing the moment he touched it. My dearest desire here, take me to that which can revive probis. Trajan's voice was harsh as his blinded eyes focused their energy vision on the door in front of him, unwavering fervor and passion rising within him. A woman could be heard crying. In a sparse, empty room, a small, petite fox humanoid could be seen, curled up in a ball. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I don't want to hurt people, but if I don't, people hurt me. Ariel curled up in a ball, her eyes red as she cried, over and over. The future she had seen had been one where she saw the consequences of her actions. Her betrayals, especially of those that were innocent and not planning against her as she thought. The pain and harm she caused to others, including their families and friends. I will not fail this. She hiccuped as she forced herself to gain control. I will use these ruins as an opportunity. One day, I will stand on my own, freely. She closed her eyes as she breathed deeply. A moment later, she reopened them, steely drive filling them. Trust is for the strong that can bear it. For the weak, trust is a luxury that we cannot afford. I will do what I must. She clenched her fists, controlling her trembling body as she took a step forward and renewed her determination. What do I most desire here? She muttered out loud as she heard a voice speak in her mind. I don't know. She paused. I'd like to apologize to those I've wrongfully killed, but that's not exactly something you can change, is it, ruins? She sighed. She placed her hand on the door and vanished. HMPH. Weak memories of a future that is as nothing to me. Ashes before the truth. Veritos mumbled quietly as she stood, floating in front of the copy of the Door of Splendor in her own private chamber. What I desire here? Why, that is simple. Her eyes flashed coldly. Bring me to where that fox I've been hunting is, of course. Veritos smiled, her voice warm. Her bloodline will make a fine addition to my collection. Mira looked at the door in front of her silently. Take me to that which holds the remnants of my grandmother. Aiden took a deep breath, his faintly draconic humanoid form giving off a strong, golden aura. Please, take me anywhere but where that infernal shapeshifter is. His voice was filled with equal parts of pain and hope, practically begging the door to obey him. Mello looked at the gorgeous door in front of him, smiling cheerfully. Now those were some joyful futures. Did I really die to a monkey, just like that? He shook his head ruefully, his eyes containing a dark light within them. I only barely managed to escape from my own brethren. To think she would seriously try to kill my clone at first sight, when I came in peace. He sighed sadly. He reached out with his hand, pausing for a moment to think before putting it on the Door of Splendor before him. Take me to the place where Lady Osra's body was set to rest. Prince Isaac calmly sat in his own private room, ignoring the conjured, smaller Door of Splendor as he concentrated on gathering his energy. Magic power flowed around him, healing energy rising from a collection of pills as he regathered his strength. Damn autarky. Why are all your strongest fighters freaks of nature? He shook his head ruefully. Why am I even on this damned mission? What do I care if that anomaly can truly become an angel of light? High Priest, sigh, he rubbed his forehead and went back to meditation. Dorian, while all of this was happening, continued to swim through the massive sea of treasure. You get absorbed, and you get absorbed. Oh, what about you? Absorbed. He gleefully absorbed treasures left and right, energy flooding into his veins without pause. Absorb everything. Ahahaha. Chapter 142. Start. Energy flowed into Dorian's veins without pause as the world around him turned to ash. Almost every artifact he touched had energy in it, of some nature, and could be absorbed into growth points by his soul spell matrix. Whoosh, clang, clang, various metallic echoes and noises rang out as the massive piles of treasure he was moving through shifted, hundreds of artifacts and more fell apart. A chain reaction of moving treasure caused the entire pile to slide around, causing the large hall to fall into a cacophony of noise. According to Osra, at a very rough estimate, Dorian needed to spend roughly 3 million to 15 million growth points to bring Will back by forming a new body using his soul spell matrix. There were many ways Dorian thought about trying to get this energy. He could hunt for extremely energy-dense artifacts, like the barrier he found at the hidden Blue Seal Casino, controlled by that pseudo-king-class wizard back on Paxitol. That barrier had cost roughly 100 million mint shields to create and had the power to stall even a king-class warrior with ease. Dorian had managed to absorb close to 1 million points of energy from it, spending it all directly to upgrade himself to grow stronger. Artifacts like that, however, were extremely rare and hard to come by. Dorian simply didn't know where to find them, and, even further, he would likely greatly antagonize whomever he was stealing from, putting himself in great danger if he couldn't sneakily steal it. The treasure store located in the Ascension ruins had had a huge draw from him. A possibly free trove of unclaimed treasure, one that seemed to be connected to him in fate because of Ukeli. Thus, coming here had been his go-to plan. And he had succeeded. Wise Jade Dragon limit has been reached. Evolving to 4th growth Santa. Evolving to 5th growth stage. Osra's voice sounded off in his head, informing him. His Wise Jade Dragon form had maxed out already, infused with some of the energy Dorian was absorbing. The massive store of treasure here made it an easy choice to finish evolving, knowing he'd have more than enough. Whoosh. Wise Jade Dragon. Growth stage, 5/5, Elder Jade Dragon. Growth progress 4,118,552 over 0. 4 million points already? Excellent. Give me more, he thought, his mind focused on taking full advantage of this opportunity, not holding back a whit. In total, he had absorbed far more than 4 million points, but a large portion of it had gone to upgrading his Wise Jade Dragon form. Jade memory ability gained. In the background, he noticed that he'd gained a new ability thanks to fully growing his Wise Jade Dragon form. Now that his form was fully grown, he could combine to create new bloodlines with it. The wise Jade Dragon bloodline was the strongest bloodline he'd ever grown naturally. The combinations it could add, especially considering it was a bloodline from a member of the 12 draconic tribes, were bound to be powerful additions. Now wasn't the time, however, to try out new combinations. He'd get that sorted once he finished saving Will and got to somewhere safe. Ability. Jade Memory. A support ability found in creatures of great intelligence or those of a calm, peaceful nature. Jade Memory is a passive ability that allows for perfect recall of anything the user sees or hears. The ability is passive and therefore not instantaneous and may take concentration, but any being with this ability is physically unable to forget anything they have heard or seen. Injuries can obstruct memory, however, as can great emotion, invalidating the perfect recall function. The world around Dorian seemed to become slightly richer. At the same time, he felt his mind seemed to shift, slightly. His memory became stronger and more precise, gaining perfect recall. It was a small, subtle change, but one that would prove immensely useful. Clang. More metal shifted as energy continued to pour into Dorian's soul. 5 million, 6 million, 10 million. As Dorian reached 10 million growth points stored within his soul spell matrix, he began to feel a sort of tearing sensation. A deep-seated pain in his soul. As he greedily absorbed everything in sight, for just an instant, Dorian also felt a strange, mystic sensation in the air, one that seemed to resonate with his law of wrath. The feeling was fleeting and quickly vanished, but, because of his newly acquired Jade Memory, could not escape his sensibilities. This feeling was ignored for now, however, as Dorian listened to the message Asra sent him. Your soul is nearing the maximum amount of growth energy it can bear within it. Exceeding this amount puts your soul in serious danger of dissipation and your body in danger of discordancy. Asra's voice sounded off in his head, warning him. I'm only at 10 million? Dorian thought, taking a moment's pause. The energy flowing in his soul felt euphoric. A sort of happy fullness that was indescribable, like nothing he had ever felt before. It felt wonderful, even with the tearing pain that was starting to appear in his mind. The upper limit Asra projected required 15 million points of energy. He frowned. Asra, if I'm reforming Will's body, can I take my time doing it, spreading out the energy required? He queried. The process will take a split second, focusing on a cellular level at an accelerated pace. Any slowing of it could result in discordancy and is not advised. Asra coolly replied. All right, he frowned. Whatever. I've come this far, I can bear a little pain for just a few minutes. He steeled himself and ran back into the massive piles of treasure. The artifacts, pills, and gold and silver coins or mints were stacked extremely haphazardly, as if Ukeli had thrown them in here as an afterthought. As Dorian moved through them, causing them to shift and sway as their bottom layers disintegrated, the number of artifacts he absorbed continued to increase. What on earth is he doing? The fool. The king-class mercenary leader Daryl shook his head as he saw the swaying treasures, turning back to focus on the doorway. He, along with the rest of those present, was studying the doorway, trying to gain a hint as to how to sneak as much wealth as possible past the trial. It hurts. Tears pulled from Dorian's eyes as he absorbed more and more growth energy, the tearing sensation in his soul increasing. In the back of his head, a voice stirred. What are you doing, fool? You will kill yourself and sever any chance you have at reaching perfection. Ukeli's old, ancient voice rose up from his consciousness as it felt the pain threading through Dorian's mind. Shut up, ghost. You don't get an opinion on this. Dorian promptly shut him out, ignoring the ancient wizard as he focused solely on his goal. 11 million, 12 million, 13 million. Seconds ticked by as Dorian madly absorbed everything he could get his hands on. By now, he had put a noticeable dent in the treasure stacks, wiping out a massive number of artifacts. The other treasures, pills and various types of gold or silver coins, didn't give much energy. What on earth is he doing? HMPH. Once he realizes spatial rings can't sneak treasure by, he'll give up all the same. Daryl Bold shook his head, a cool, calculating king-class aura surrounding him as he went back to studying the leaving door, his chess-piece-shaped brown hair wobbling slightly. 14 million, Dorian thought, feeling the tearing sensation increase in output as he absorbed a glowing gold bench, one that was painted with pictures of the heavens themselves. He gained nearly 80,000 growth points from that bench alone. He picked up another artifact, an axe that gleamed with darkness, absorbing it in one shot as well, taking in a huge 40,000 growth points. The treasures here mostly only gave him a few thousand points, but there were powerful ones spread out as well, all adding up to a vast amount of energy. It was as if his soul was full to the bursting, the amount of energy he held far too much. Danger! Your soul has overdrawn its maximum growth energy storage. Absorbing more energy, Sue. I know, Asra. Can it? He responded, cutting her off. You are killing yourself? All to save the life of a stranger you barely know. Euclid's ancient voice appeared in Dorian's head once more. This time, however, it carried an odd tone in it, one Dorian couldn't quite place. Your perseverance to right wrongs and restore the balance of things is admirable, if foolish and not headed towards perfection. A strong commitment and force of will is a baseline to achieve perfection. Perhaps I gave up on you too soon. For the first time, Euclid actually seemed to approve, at least to some small amount, of Dorian's actions. Almost there. Keep it up, Dorian. He encouraged himself as he finished absorbing most of the artifacts in one large pile and moved off to another. As he was crossing over to the large, dozens of meters high pile, a loud thudding sound caught his attention. Right next to him, a figure had landed. A blind, robe-covered vampire with a tired-looking face and long brown hair. A vampire Dorian recognized. The Aurelius Reaver, Trajan. You can help me? The man that saved us from before? Trajan stared at Dorian with his energy eyes, a hint of awe and fear appearing in his voice. Me? What? Dorian responded, taken aback and shocked by the sudden appearance of the vampire. The pain in his soul made it difficult for him to think clearly. As Trajan looked at Dorian, with surprise and fear in his eyes, he didn't see a regular being. In his energy vision, he saw a creature who gave off energy like a star gives off light. Great gouts of power and might flowed around Dorian's soul, a ridiculously powerful level of concentrated energy that seemed incredible. Even the strongest king-class wizards Trajan had met had failed to give off this sensation. Yet, Trajan could only sense a physical strength at the Lord-class level. It was confusing and mysterious, but that only convinced him more. The ruins brought me to you, again, Savior. You are the one that can heal my friend. Trajan fell down to his right knee and slammed his head down, bowing. Please, I beg you. Help me again. Revive my brother from the dead. He waved his right hand, causing a corpse to appear out of a spatial ring. That of a fallen vampire wearing a set of leather armor, with a long blade strapped to his back, and long brown hair tied up in a bun. Another vampire Dorian recognized, Probis. Dorian stared at the vampire and the vampire corpse in shock, completely taken aback. Helena's friend died? Thud. Trajan. A familiar female voice called out from behind Dorian, landing right behind him. I caught up to you. We didn't finish talking, Helena said, her eyes zeroing in on Trajan before looking at Dorian in surprise. You are the man that saved us from the shades earlier? Thank you. Helena bowed towards him before her eyes widened as she saw what was in front of him. Is that Probus' corpse? Trajan, what are you doing? She immediately focused on this, looking at Trajan in shock. Helena, this is not the business of the Aurelius family. Back off. Trajan clenched his hands together tightly behind his back, giving her a stern glare. He then turned right back towards Dorian, bowing his head again. Please, Savior, save my friend. Helena paused, looking between Dorian and Trajan in confusion. Thud. Dorian clutched at his head, feeling the pain try to sweep over him. It was so painful, his soul stretching and feeling as if it was pulling apart, that he was unable to physically move. He could still sense his surroundings, but had to put his full effort into simply containing the massive store of energy in his soul. Asra, how can I start making Will's body? He said, asking a question as he largely ignored the situation around him, focused internally. He was so close, almost at 15 million growth points. Close enough to feel safe starting. Your current physical form is not suited for the construction of a new body due to its poor sensory capabilities in regards to magic. It is recommended that you switch to a more adept form. Once you have done that, simply give the command and I will begin running the required simulations using the energy you have provided. Asra responded. Whoosh. Dorian's form shifted, returning to a form he was quite familiar with. His Ifrit form. Trajan Uca huh? Helena turned back to stare at Dorian, her mouth falling open in absolute shock. Dorian? She sputtered out, stepping backwards a few steps as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Dorian? Another female voice called out the same name, in equal levels of shock, hiding behind a pile of artifacts and treasure only a dozen meters away. Ariel stared at Dorian, her entire body frozen as she saw someone she thought she had already killed, recognizing his Ifrit form. The memories of the futures she saw, and the pain and agonizing consequences she felt, washed through her as she looked at him, trembling. Ifrit. Growth stage. 4 quarters, Elder Ifrit. Growth progress 14,898,199/0. Asra, begin running those simulations. I'm going to form Will's body, here and now. All of the ongoing events were ignored by Dorian as he forced the pain in his soul down. And began to recreate Will's body, not hesitating. I'll deal with you, Trajan, Helena, after I finish this. All he needed was a single second after Asra finished planning everything. Initializing simulations. Running now. Asra's voice echoed in his head as she began running calculations. Dorian felt the agonizing pain in his soul settle slightly, energy slowly becoming spent. At the edge of Dorian's soul, a small ball of golden light could be seen. A ball that was glimmering quietly, one that was starting to faintly pulse. Will's quiet, resting soul. It was time. Finally, after this massive, dangerous journey. It was time to finish this. Whoosh. In that moment, as Dorian was paralyzed, working at full capacity to finally rescue Will, one more figure appeared near him. A pale woman, wearing a long gray dress with a hood, standing on what appeared to be floating clouds, with no visible feet. A holy aura surrounded this woman, giving off a warm, welcoming feeling. As this woman appeared, Trajan, Helena, and Ariel all turned to look at it, each reacting differently. No, not you. Trajan's face took on an appearance of fear and rage. The target, veritos. Helena clenched her fists, staring at the anomaly. She reached for her spatial ring, readying the powerful artifact she had been gifted. It's you. The one hunting me. Ariel slunk behind the pile of artifacts, her heart pounding. Whoosh. Wind burst out from where the anomaly veritos had just appeared, the holy, welcoming aura spreading. As it spread, the kingly aura came crashing down with a terrible, unforgiving might. One that, on the face of it, didn't seem overwhelmingly strong. But at its core, held a mysterious, fate-twisting edge. Ah, hello, my children, my brethren, we meet again. Veritos smiled as she looked at the vampires and then at Dorian. In her hands appeared a sword that seemed to be made of pure light. Allow me to share with you all, without delay, that which leads to perfection. Her voice was motherly. The truth. Boom. The kingly aura spread out at a full blaze, rocking the air itself as the anomaly veritos slunk forward towards the paralyzed Dorian, who was currently in the middle of reconstructing Will's body. And attacked. Chapter 143. Unfolding. Damn it. Where is Leader or Aiden when you need them? Dorian thought furiously, his mind still focused on controlling the energy that threatened to tear his soul apart. Neither of the two powerful king-class fighters seemed to have been transported to where he was. Helena was the first to react. Whoosh! A powerful aura of might spread out around her as she went on full alert, energy rippling off in waves. Stop right there. Dorian, move! Helena yelled out loud, jumping forward as she saw the anomaly swoop towards Dorian. Her heart dropped as she saw Dorian stand still, seemingly dazed. No. Impact magic. Heavy impact. She cast a basic impact magic spell, one designed for instant use. Immediately, her momentum was greatly increased as what felt like a battering ram collided with her back, knocking her forward. She hurled through the air just fast enough to slam into the attacking anomaly before it reached the stunned Dorian. Hiya! Boom! An explosion of energy rang out as Helena's aura collided with the warm, welcoming aura that Veritas held. Helena punched through this, her arms moving skillfully as she struck past the anomaly's guard, her fist landing directly on its chest. Oof! Veritas exhaled as she was knocked backwards. The anomaly had tried to swing its sword of light upward to cut Helena as she attacked, but missed. Helena's extreme skill and practice in close combat made dodging the attack almost simplistic. The attack had only shocked Veritas, however, leaving no real injury. The ghostly woman raised a hand to her chest, tapping on it lightly before looking up. "Ah, I see. You again, vampire." Veritos spoke, staring at Helena from under her hood. "What the hell?" Daryl Bold looked up from in front of the leaving door as the anomaly spoke, alongside the other Lord-class wizards, all turning around to see a small explosion of gold coins and treasure. The impact from the attack had created a miniature shockwave, throwing around much of the treasure in the center of the room. "What do all of you think you are doing? The battle for the entrances may have been a free-for-all, but we're all in here now and there is no point fighting each other. It won't affect your winnings or any of the trials." He continued, frowning fiercely. "I won't sit by and allow for casual murder or robbery. I wouldn't be a bold brother if I did otherwise." A king-class aura of Daryl's own burst forth as he began to stalk forward, his chestpiece hair wobbling. "Anomaly Veritas, we have no quarrel with you. I was sent here to negotiate with you," Helena began, ignoring everything else. At the same time, she withdrew a small bracelet from her spatial ring, slipping it on behind her back. The Capitoline Wolf bracelet, a powerful, ancient artifact she had as her backup. Veritas ignored her, turning to look at a decidedly pale-faced Trajan. "Ah, vampire, you have already seen the truth," Veritas said, her voice warm as she looked at the wizard. "Not any truth I would care about," Trajan spat out, forcibly overcoming his shock and horror as he looked at Probis' corpse. Trajan glanced over at Dorian, his energy vision letting him see that Dorian seemed to be frozen. "You rejected the truth?" Veritas shook her head somberly, sadness in her voice. "It seems I must kill you after all." Veritas began to float towards Trajan calmly. "Hold on. We can talk this OV. Listen to me, you ghastly woman." Helena swore aloud as she stood her ground between the advancing anomaly and Dorian, her fist clenched. She held the ancient artifact at the ready, prepared to use it at a moment's notice. "There's no use talking to it, Helena." Trajan shook his head, a look of intense concentration appearing. "Savior, I will protect you in return for your aid." Trajan continued as he clasped his hands together. Rain magic. Water knives. Hundreds of blades made of pure water formed in the air in a split second, hovering over Trajan's head. Rain magic. Aquarius shield. He cast a second spell at the same time. Immediately, several large 5 meters wide shields formed and surrounded him, Probis' corpse, and Dorian protectively as Trajan stepped forward. "Helena, careful, its techniques are as weird as I said in my report," Trajan warned, holding his hands up as he prepared to unleash the hundreds of water knives, each one infused with the power of the law of rain. While the law wasn't extremely offensively powered, each knife would still hold the power of a pseudo-king-class wizard's spell, not something that could just be ignored. "I know," Helena grunted, staring face to face with Veritas as the anomaly returned in front of her. Veritas sighed quietly. "Ah, child, you have refused to see the truth. Therefore, I will open your eyes for you. Let the falsities you know be inverted, only the truth shall remain." Veritas' eyes flashed. Whoosh! The aura around the anomaly abruptly spread out fully, feeling warm and welcoming, but buried within it was a hint of danger. As Helena sensed this, she didn't wait to see what the anomaly was doing or give it any time to monologue. "I can't win it over." "Fine. Then you are dead to me, anomaly. I will kill you and restore Trajan's sight, as well as rid the world of your vile presence." With that thought in mind, Helena attacked immediately, using her full understanding of the law of might to launch one of her strongest techniques, holding back nothing. Impact magic. Royal Impact Series number 6. Helena's eyes glowed a brilliant white shade as she squared up, shifting her body slightly to the side. She pulled her right arm back. As she did so, 2 circles of white light formed in the air, one about 2 meters across, and the other 3 meters across, surrounding the first one. Muscles began to bulge and swell on her arms. Grand Meteor Impact. Helena punched forward with a blow that carried with it the force of a massive meteor impact. The stone floor beneath Helena cracked. It was made of the same tough, magically enhanced material that made up the rest of the Ascension ruins. Despite that, it was no match for the raw force Helena had just caused to form, the sheer power in the impact she had summoned reaching a gargantuan level. The Royal Impact Series was a series of spells created by the forefather of impact magic, Emmanuel Hope, a wizard that reached the angelic class. Each number in the series was a unique and powerful spell that carried huge amounts of force. The grand meteor impact was the sixth strongest spell, one that transmitted the full force of an enormous, 100-meter wide and large meteor crashing into a world from beyond the boundaries of chaotic space. An attack of this scale, it was not something even most king-class wizards or warriors could unleash. Impact magic was notorious for its powerful magical blows, and this combined with Helena's high mastery and the fact that she was only a step away from king class meant that her attack had reached its full potential. She had previously been able to use this technique at a basic level, but only truly mastered it within the past few weeks. Veritos' eyes narrowed as she saw the colossal blow blasting forward, causing the air itself to quake. Without hesitation, Veritos muttered a single phrase. World invert. Whoosh. The law Veritos studied was one of the most abstruse and difficult known laws to comprehend in the 30,000 worlds. A complex law known as the law of inversion. Everything in reality has an opposite. The opposite of heat was cold. The opposite of hard was soft. The opposite of black was white. The law of inversion focused on this concept, of there existing an opposite of all things. A complicated and exceedingly difficult to picture idea that very few people had ever heard of, let alone attempted to study. Veritos was an anomaly and a name, but the word veritos also referred to a unique species. A type of semi-divine creature, a race of beings born from the ether, possessing ghostly qualities. Members of the Veritos race lived between the realm of the living and the dead, not quite existing in either realm. This quality allowed the Veritos race to possess a unique sensibility when it came to seeing the true nature of a being. Or, the truth, as Veritos the anomaly sometimes referred to it. Her own truth, the truth of her goals, or the truth of others. She could see the thing a person depended upon most, a core part of their true nature. By sealing that thing away, she believed that others would see the truth that she believed in. She sealed away Trajan's eyes, something he relied upon intently to cast his spells and study magic. She sealed away Probis' swordarm, something that he had practiced and trained with since birth, something that was a part of his own understanding of the law of cutting. All to help them give up their own truth, and see her own truth. And what exactly was that truth? She didn't know. Her compulsion to seek others out and seal their nature, to open them up to see the truth, was something she didn't quite understand. All she knew was that if she continued on this path, eventually, her own truth would be revealed to her. And that truth would lead her to perfection. World invert. The phrase veritas had muttered echoed in the air, containing a strange, mystic property. Veritas' aura abruptly became enhanced to an extreme degree, crashing down on Helena. A tense moment slipped by as Helena rushed forward, her movements tight and controlled. Trajan watched Veritas' every movement. His eyes widened as he heard the word, starting to shout out a warning. Unfortunately, it was too late for Helena to hear. Whoosh! Before Helena's very eyes, as she was charging at Veritas, only a few meters away, and carrying an impact that was as powerful as a crashing meteor. The world itself transformed. Everything became inverted. Black turned to white. White turned to black. Colors shifted to opposite ends of the spectrum. Up became down. Down became up. Right became left. Left became right. Sounds flipped across spectrums. Loud noises becoming quiet while quiet noises became loud. Pure, unadulterated chaos spread across Helena's senses as the reality around her twisted into a madhouse. What? She sputtered, at a complete loss. Even her own words sounded horrifying, a maze of confusing echoes and screeches. Helena tried to keep running forward. However, as she tried to bring her leg forward, she tripped. Forward had transformed into backwards, and her entire body twisted around as she smashed to a halt, everything going wrong. From Dorian's perspective, as he watched all of this, his heart trembling while Asra ran her simulations, Helena had started charging forward and then stopped abruptly, twisting around in midair. Her body physically leapt backwards, crashing into a pile of treasure off to the side. Boom! The terrifying blow that Helena had carried slammed into the pile of treasure with her, detonating. No, the grand meteor impact took up a huge amount of her energy. She could only cast the spell 3 times in total at her best, and she was certainly not at peak condition right now. 1 second. There was a huge pile of treasure, rare artifacts, random pills, and gold and silver sitting in a large, 10-meter-high pile. The next second, the pile was gone. A vast shockwave spread out as the pile of treasure literally exploded. Coins, pills, and artifacts shooting off in 1,000 different angles. Tink, tink, boom. A huge burst of wind whipped about the room as hundreds of treasures were flung through the air, turned into cascading shrapnel. The treasures pelted the challengers and knocked over hundreds of other treasures in other piles, flinging about randomly. My God, are they trying to destroy the ruins themselves? Daryl boldly retreated as he felt the force of this impact, recognizing that it had already exceeded the limits of his own strength to handle. Brother, come quickly, and inform the Blazing King's Scythe Master Henry that some madmen are trying to destroy the ruins from the inside, in the main treasure room trial. The mercenary fled to the entrance of the room while speaking into an artifact he pulled out from his spatial ring, a glowing white letter. He promptly broke the letter artifact as he finished speaking, sending out a message. Dorian, through fate or not, was lucky he was standing near the origin of the blow. None of the treasures hit him. Trajan had a few ping off his water shields, but he was mostly fine. Ariel, still hiding behind a pile of nearby treasure, merely crouched low to the ground, the treasures missing her body. The shockwave was incredibly powerful. However, instead of spreading out as a normal shockwave would, the entire attack seemed to vanish after an instant. It didn't make it farther than a few meters past its point of origin. The ruins seemed to absorb the energy of the aftermath of the attack, preventing it from causing a huge amount of structural or physical damage to the treasures, or breaking the trial. Damn, water knives. Go, Trajan swore as he saw all of this, immediately supporting Helena. Whoosh, a deluge of knives cut through the air towards Veritos, preventing the anomaly from attacking the dazed female vampire. Veritos swung upward with the sword of light she wielded, melting knife after knife as she adeptly cut through Trajan's attack. Suddenly, her aura shivered slightly, unable to continuously hold up its enhanced state. The moment that aura faded, Helena regained control, the world reverting to its normal state. Hup, she stumbled backwards, holding her hands at guard as she looked at the horrifying anomaly with a hint of fear. I can't let her do that again. Her mind was awash with horror and anger, the strange distortion of reality still present in her mind. Helena took a moment to recover, her senses just now returning. In that moment, the anomaly Veritos moved, not heading towards Trajan or Helena, but instead, right towards Dorian. Not good. Dorian still couldn't move. Asra was still making simulations using Will's soul and he only needed a single second to recreate Will's body after that. But till then, even taking a hint of his concentration away from controlling his soul could cause it to rip apart, and if he stopped Asra, Will's soul would be the one to suffer. He was already too far gone. The incredibly bad timing the anomaly had shown up with seemed to be almost dictated by fate. I can see a great truth within you, my brethren. Allow me to sunder it so that you can focus on seeing the real truth, the one that guides even me. Forgive me if my actions come across as rude, for my intentions are pure. Veritos seemed largely unperturbed by her failure to kill Helena in one shot, as if it didn't matter in the end. No, Trajan yelled out loud as his energy vision detected this. Dorian was the only one that could save Probis. At the least, that was what Trajan was convinced of. Without hesitating, Trajan threw himself forward, the protective shields that covered his body falling apart as he rushed outside them, between Dorian and the anomaly. He was standing only a few meters from the creature. Rain magic. Chaos Rai ULP. Trajan's voice cut off. Abruptly, his spell interrupted. The vampire looked down at his chest in shock. A glowing sword of light had appeared, pierced straight through his chest. The sword wasn't made of actual physical matter, however, and there was no sign of a cut or injury. The blade had moved so quickly that Trajan hadn't been able to react at all. Foolish child, I have already cut your sight from you, to make you better able to see the truth. Veritos smiled sadly as she halted, looking straight at Trajan. She flicked her wrist to the side, pulling the blade out from his chest, revealing Trajan's uninjured torso. Trajan's face became pale as he clutched at his chest and then at his throat, a look of sheer horror on his face. Your eyes have already been sealed by my blade, Veritos said, holding up her sword of light. She tapped on it lightly. I took your eyes from you. And now, Veritos smiled warmly, I have taken your breath. You were given a chance to see the truth, and you failed. I apologize, but you can no longer continue trying. In a single, smooth motion, Veritos casually knocked into Trajan's side, throwing him several meters to the side. ULP, ULP, ULP. Trajan clutched at his throat, trying desperately to breathe. His lungs, however, seemed to have stopped functioning. Veritos had sealed them. No, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't help you right now. I can't stop. I will save you. Dorian mentally yelled in his mind as he witnessed this, unable to move still. His heart twisted in pain as he saw the brave sacrifice, hatred burning in his heart for the other anomaly. As a vampire, Trajan had very strong regenerative properties. As a pseudo-king class wizard, he had even more energy and power to draw from. Despite all of that, it was inarguable that he still needed to breathe in order to live. Erg! Trajan's body shook as he fell down on one knee, landing beside the corpse of Probis. The regenerative properties of his body battled against the oxygen deprivation, trying desperately to keep him alive as he collapsed, looking up at the anomaly Veritos. An anomaly that had already moved on, floating towards Dorian. No, you will not. Helena screamed out loud as she saw all of this, an aura of might the likes of which had never been felt before. A close friend had been murdered recently, another close friend was currently dying, and the last person she considered a close friend, a unique being that even she didn't understand how she felt for, was in danger of being killed. All of this swooped into Helena, the stress and anger she felt filling her up, and caused her aura to explode outward, ferocious might filling her body. She drew upon everything, demanding an ultimate power. Insights like she had never known flooded into her mind. And, in a flash, the feeling of her aura changed. From that of Lord class to that of King class. Helena had broken through, her soul spell matrix evolving as her understanding of the law of might reached her own level of completion. Useless. Veritos whispered quietly as Helena, visibly covered in writhing energy, slammed down on the ground in front of her. The female vampire stood with her arms raised, her eyes bleeding fury. You hold great faith in your strength and in your skill, but you cannot defeat everything through pure might, Veritos said in one motion as her aura exploded outward too. World invert. Once more, Helena's reality was thrown into pure, backwards chaos. Everything was inverted. This time, however, Helena came prepared. Capitoline Wolf Bracelet, activate. The Capitoline Wolf Bracelet was an ancient artifact of great power. It had two functions, one for escaping and one for attacking. The attack function was unique in that it granted the user great power, allowing them to overcome obstacles that they normally wouldn't be able to resist. By activating it after she was being swarmed by Veritas aura and confusing laws, Helena believed she would be able to throw off the chaotic aura, resisting it. The bracelet artifact was specifically designed to throw off debilitating effects and clear a user's mind while enhancing their personal strength. And Helena was correct. Cool, cold energy roared into Helena's veins. The ancient howls of wolves, their cries and yells, filled her ears as she felt the energy wash over her senses, letting her see through the distorted reality that Veritas had unfolded. Got you. She smiled and leapt towards the anomaly, wasting no time. Virile, ferocious energy melded with her own energy from the law of might, further enhancing her strength. Yes, Helena, hell yes. Take her down. Dorian mentally yelled in exultation as he saw this, cheering her on. Veritas' eyes widened in shock as she saw this. The anomaly was completely exposed, in a vulnerable position. She had depended on her law protecting her as she moved forward, intending to stab Helena with her sword made of energy. Halfway through Helena's leap, something odd happened. The world around Helena flickered. In that split second, the glowing Capitoline Wolf Bracelet seemed to waver. Abruptly, the artifact cut off its activation, energy flowing out of it. What? Helena's first thoughts were filled with shock and confusion as the world around her instantly returned to its distorted state. In the main treasure depository, there existed thousands of artifacts. To prevent challengers from using these artifacts for dangerous or non-trial related reasons, Ukeli had constructed the room in such a way that any artifact used would have its effect dampened and depleted, unable to fully activate. The same effect applied to any artifacts that were brought into the room. Whoosh! No. The world around Helena was completely inverted. She completely lost track of Veritas, unable to see through any of the distorted reality around her. Thunk! Everything returned to normal as Helena felt a momentous impact slam into her chest and stab completely through it. The female vampire looked down at the sword of light that pierced through her chest in shock. The sword did not cause any visible wound, but instead caused her soul itself to tremble with pain. I can see your true nature. You have such confidence in your might, in your physical prowess. Veritos' warm voice slithered into her head as Helena stood frozen, unable to move. Yes, what you use the most, what you could not bear to lose. Veritos' voice trailed off. The creature's arms blurred as it abruptly cut forward, a second blade of light appearing. Snip. Helena felt a burning sensation sweep her body. A moment later, she was able to move again, the sword of light leaving her chest. As she tried to clutch at herself in pain, however, Helena looked down at her arms and saw what the anomaly had done. Tears threatened to burst from her eyes as she felt a sickening sense of horror and repulsion, overwhelming the fear and pain she was experiencing. She no longer had hands. Veritos had stolen them from her. Boom! The anomaly casually kicked Helena away. Helena's body tumbled away in shock, the female vampire undergoing a sickening sensation as part of her body was sealed, forever unable to regenerate or be restored, lest the person who set the seal died. And now you, my brave, foolish brethren. Veritos stopped just a couple of meters from Dorian, giving him a warm, assured smile. No, no, I am so close. No, Helena, no, I am so sorry. No, what do? I can't stop this. Will. 1,000 thoughts flooded into Dorian's mind as Veritos arrived in front of him. Asra was still running simulations. In real time, it had only been a few seconds since she started, not enough to finish. If he stopped now, Will would truly perish. He would break the one promise he had made to himself. If he didn't stop now, it seemed he would die, as would Helena and Trajan. No, please no, please, I am so close. Please don't make me choose. Tears welled up in Dorian's paralyzed body as all of this came into him. In the back of Dorian's mind, the darkness that was present began to flicker, gaining intensity. This darkness began to spread once more, Euclid's touch on his mind growing in strength. It is time for you to see the truth. Veritos held her sword out in front of her, pointing it at Dorian. Please no. Dorian's mental voice was harried, an agony-filled scream. Please, don't make me do this. The darkness that was in his mind threatened to explode fully, spreading out at a vast rate. Euclid's touch grew stronger and stronger, ready to fully immerse itself within Dorian, to merge at a truly inseparable level. Please, Dorian begged, putting his entire will into this. Begging for his fate to change. Just as Veritos was about to stab forward, a flicker of movement caught her eye. Whoosh! Tink! Veritos slid backwards slightly, a look of surprise on her face. A petite girl with tufted fox ears had landed on the ground in front of Dorian, holding her own blade of light at the ready. The girl was shaking, her entire body trembling as if this was a terrifying experience. A weak, Lord-class aura rose up around the girl, one that could barely compete with the mighty King-class aura Veritos gave off. A familiar figure, one Dorian had never expected to stand up and try to protect him. The figure of Ariel VH, the Lightsworn Fox. Stop. I will not let you kill him. I won't let him die again. Chapter 144, Success. Dorian only needed a single second to use whatever plan Asra figured out, after the genie finished running simulations using Will's soul. Those simulations, however, involved a near incalculable number of variables and pulled on the essence of Will's dormant soul itself, meaning once they started, they could not stop, not without irreparably harming Will. While Asra, as a soul spell matrix genie, was incredibly powerful, smarter and faster than any modern supercomputer back on Earth, she was not a god. It took time to run those calculations. Even Asra herself was unsure exactly how long it would take due to all the unknowns, only that it should take a relatively small amount of time. Almost 30 seconds had passed since Asra had started. A trivial amount of time, in a static situation. But in this dire situation, it was time that passed agonizingly slow for Dorian. Especially considering that his soul was threatening to tear at the seams due to the vast amount of energy within it, and required his full concentration. If he moved even an iota of his will off of forcing himself to stay together, his soul would collapse. Thus, for the last 30 seconds, he had been frozen still, unable to take action. Ariel? What? He could spare at least some thought for what was happening, if nothing else. Ariel had just jumped out and protected him. Aye. Ariel's breath was ragged as she looked at Veritas, her entire body trembling. The warm, welcoming aura that Veritas gave off might seem friendly at first glance, but was one that was incredibly powerful, creating a massive amount of pressure. Veritas was, after all, a true king-class being, well stronger than Ariel's early lord-class strength. I am sorry, Dorian. As Ariel faced down Veritas, she spoke aloud to Dorian. The vision of the future Ariel saw was one that lived in her mind. The door of splendor didn't only show her one future, in fact, but many. The futures of the ones she had betrayed or injured, the futures of the ones she had killed, or at least, the suffering her actions caused. The pain, agony, heartbreak, and horror that she saw in those futures stayed with Ariel, each emotion vividly felt. All I can say is I am sorry. The wrongs I have done in this world, there is no repentance for me. Ariel's eyes teared up. Ah, young fox, you have come to me yourself. Come, let me show you the truth as well. You shall join with me, to help me evolve to become a true angel of light. Veritas had a pleased tone in her voice as she drifted forward, the blade of light she wielded raised in her hands. Dorian's eyes widened slightly as he heard Ariel truly repent. The fox that had brutally betrayed him, leaving him for dead. A being who had lied to him, shown him nothing but evil before today. I forgive you. Somehow, impossibly, Dorian managed to split off enough of his will to whisper aloud something he felt in his heart. The evils she had inflicted upon him, they were not something he could forget. She had tried to kill him. But after today, seeing her risk her life to protect him, he could forgive her. Whoosh! For the second time today, Dorian felt a mystical source of energy appear in his mind for a brief moment. Once more, the feeling vanished in an instant, overpowered by the presence of the two laws he had been baptized by, wrath and valor. However, thanks to his jade memory, this sensation was permanently remembered. The first mystical sensation had resonated with the law of wrath. This one, however, seemed to resonate with the law of valor. Dorian pushed aside the second sensation for now as he had the first. He could not afford to move any of his concentration away, not even to check out what each was. Not until Asra finished and he had spent the millions of energy points that were threatening to tear his soul apart. Finalizing simulations. Final soul-body recreation sequencing initializing. Approximate time to completion is rated at 26 seconds. Out of nowhere, Asra spoke in Dorian's mind, informing him. 26 seconds. Dorian's eyes bled energy as he focused on this. He needed to survive only 26 seconds and he was free to act. Come, daughter. See the truth. Veritas launched forward, her body blurring towards Ariel at an extremely fast speed. The powerful king-class aura she emanated brooked no opposition, not from a weak early lord-class being. Thud. Before Ariel had time to react, it was too late. Ariel's body shivered backwards a meter, her feet skidding on the ground. The tufted ear fox girl looked down at her chest, where a blade of light was currently pierced through it. She felt no pain, for the sword was made of light and existed on a metaphysical level. Its powers were magic in nature. The moment this blade pierces you, your fate is sealed, young fox. Even I cannot remove that. This sword of light shall cut away whatever it is that defines you. For you, Veritas began, tilting her hooded head to the side oddly. For you, that would be your heart. A bitter, frail, broken heart. Selfish, weak. Yet, only recently, brave and courageous. Veritas' voice was warm, full of false care, as she shrugged. Well, the ceiling is a literal one, so you'll die without your heart rather close to instantly. If you have any last words, you may speak them now. 7 seconds had passed. Ariel looked up at the anomaly and then twisted her head to look back at Dorian. Blood dripped down from her eyes, trailing like tears. Simply standing this close to Veritas when the anomaly was fully unleashing her aura was incredibly damaging to Ariel's body. Thank you for your forgiveness, Dorian. Ariel whispered, her voice quiet. I am undeserving. The fox girl turned back to looking at Veritas. This blade of yours, anything it cuts now shall lose their heart, is that the truth? Veritas looked down at Ariel, her eyes filled with pity. Yes, daughter, that is the truth. It is the natural ability of my kind. The sealing blade, until I activate and redefine it on someone else, right now it shall seal away the heart of any being it pierces. Veritos withdrew the sword from Ariel's chest in one smooth, blurringly fast motion. Ariel fell down to her knees, lightheaded and dazed. 17 seconds had passed. Now, child, I have given you a send-off. Come, accept your death, and join with me in life. Swish. Moving so quickly Ariel couldn't physically track it, Veritos stabbed her in the chest once more. This time, Ariel felt an odd, sickening sensation sweep over her. Her entire body shivered as she felt a jarring change. Her heart disappeared. Thud. Ariel fell to her knees as blood burst from her lips and dripped down her eyes, her body immediately starting to die. Without a heart to pump blood, her entire body started to fail, the world around her turning a shade of red as her vision became clouded. Veritos, Ariel muttered, raising two trembling hands. You are here to absorb me. But do you know the unique ability that my race possesses? Her words were raspy as she spoke, blood spurting from her lips. Veritos ignored her as she reached out with an arm, resting it on Ariel's shoulder. The anomaly was preparing to absorb her bloodline immediately upon Ariel's death. It's an ability known as touching light. It allows a lightsworn fox to manipulate anything made of light. Ariel rested her shaking hands on the blade that was pierced through her chest. A blade that was made of pure, magical light. Anything at all. Ariel smiled, a bloody rictus full of dying satisfaction. Whoosh, swish. Veritos looked down at her right arm in shock. The sword of light that she had stabbed through Ariel with, had, somehow, impossibly, extended backwards, shooting out at an extremely fast speed. The blade had stabbed through Veritos' right arm, not giving the anomaly time to react. No, how dare you? Whoosh. The blade of light vanished as Veritos deactivated ability. Not in time, however, to prevent it from affecting her. Bright red blood spurted out of Veritos' lips as she, too, had her heart sealed away. Her entire body shook as pain racked it, causing the fearsome king-class anomaly to scream in pain. Veritos, as a being, existed in a state between life and death. The loss of her heart was a fatal blow to her strength, but it was not enough to kill her. Veritos' kindly and warm demeanor vanished as her left arm shot forward, grabbing towards Ariel's throat. You horrid creature. 24 seconds had passed. Veritos ripped Ariel's throat out. In the last instant before she died, Ariel turned to look at Dorian. In her eyes there was neither pain nor sadness, neither hate nor despair. The only emotion left was happiness. Even though it cost her her life, for the first time, Ariel felt like she had done the right thing in her lonely life. Thud. Ariel's body fell to the ground. Dead. Absorb. Veritos snarled, resting her hand on the corpse of Ariel. Whoosh. Ariel's body fell to ash as Veritos absorbed everything it possessed, all the energy and her bloodline. Her spatial ring fell to the floor with a quiet tink, rattling down in the dust. The anomaly's body was racked with light as it transformed slightly, the bloodline starting to merge with Veritos' own. Without an Asura there to guide them, all other anomalies had to slowly merge bloodlines with their own, unable to evolve like Dorian did. Off to the side, Trajan groaned, his eyes rolling up in the back of his head as the lack of air drove his body unconscious. Helena was still stunned, her sitting in the treasure as her body tried to overcome the physical shock her soul felt. 26 seconds passed. Simulations complete. The required energy to recreate the body of Will on a perfect wavelength to the current level of his soul spell matrix, from the air, is 27,123,122 points. Dorian's heart dropped as Asura finished running her calculations, giving him the result. Her estimated energy requirement had been way off. The energy required to perfectly recreate and match a body to a powerful wizard, essentially resurrecting the dead, was far more than Dorian had expected. It wasn't entirely unexpected. Asura had had almost no data to go from for this. To even guess near the relative ballpark was already a fantastic achievement. However, due to the baptism of the law of light and the light magic his soul experienced, it is possible to reduce this cost by using a very powerful substitute material that is strongly aspected towards light, and cleansing it to recreate his physical form. Asura's voice in Dorian's head echoed as the genie continued, her voice hinting to him. Dorian looked up, his heart full of fire. A powerful being that was strongly aspected towards light. A description that perfectly matched the creature that was standing in front of Dorian, merging with the bloodline of a lightsworn fox. A being that stood between life and death, with an ability that manipulated light, that was working towards becoming an angel of light. Perfect body, activate. Dorian abandoned his focus on containing his soul. Immediately, searing pain spread through his body as the massive storage of energy began to riot within him, trying to rip him to pieces. At the same time, the world around him lost color as his physique was vastly enhanced. Thundering winds, flush gale. Dorian's body blurred forward as he activated a movement technique, blasting forward at an incredibly fast speed. Veritos was already close to him. Dorian managed to cross the distance between the two of them in an instant. The anomaly was preoccupied with initiating the merging of her bloodline with Ariel's, a process that would take hours if not days. As soon as Dorian landed next to her, however, she went on guard, her entire body spinning towards him. Rippling, king-class energy flew off her, threatening to swarm down and blast Dorian away. Unfortunately for Veritos, the injury to her body, having her heart sealed away, had greatly weakened her physique. Perhaps in time she could recover, but as of right now, her reaction speed was too slow to catch up to Dorian's movement. Dorian's right arm cut down through the air, slamming into Veritos' chest. Energy go. Asra, go. Dorian mentally thrust forth the energy that was threatening to tear apart his soul, controlling the massive, flooding torrent. Immediately, magic symbols and signs flashed in front of Dorian's eyes as Asra helped guide the energy he was sending into tens of thousands of mystic patterns, formations, and shapes. What? Veritos' entire body abruptly shined with light, freezing in mid-twirl as she stared at Dorian. Her body slumped down to the ground, falling with a thump. Whoosh! A split second later, the torrent of energy crashed into Veritos' soul. Dorian felt a sense of resistance, of pushback. A feeling of fate trying to change, to will the energy back. Absolutely not. Dorian's eyes were iron, his will steel, as he thrust back, putting every iota of strength into controlling the torrent of energy. He focused on twisting fate, forcing Veritos to back down. And he succeeded. Boom! A small explosion rang out as bright white light shot off from Veritos' body, accompanied by an angry, agonized scream. The truth shall find you. Veritos didn't get to finish what she was saying as her consciousness, her soul itself, was completely cast out. As her voice cut off, every single seal that Veritos had left instantly was released. Helena's hands restored themselves. Trajan gained back his lungs and eyes. Even Probis' corpse gained back his missing arm. His body returned to a normal, if still dead and frozen in a time stasis, state. Back on Veritos' body, the torrent of energy continued flooding into the now vacant body, cleansing and modifying the very foundation the body rested upon. It gradually shifted from that of a Veritos to a more distinct human being, with normal legs. Instead of pale skin, warm, slightly glowing skin replaced it. The body wasn't that of a normal human, but was still very close. Particles of light swirled about as a devastatingly mighty aura burst forth, an incredible wave of energy spreading in the air as the body formed. At the same time, Will's dormant soul began to flicker. In one smooth motion, Dorian felt the soul vanish from his presence, joining the flood of energy that was pouring into the body of the now dead anomaly. Whoosh! The flood of energy abruptly stopped. The body of Veritos had luckily been extremely suited to housing Will's soul. Even with the need to reform and cleanse the entire body's cells, the amount of energy Dorian had spent had only been a fraction of the amount in his soul. It's too much still, Dorian realized as he felt the huge store of energy, millions of points, still present within his soul. He needed to get rid of a large chunk of it. A memory flashed in his mind. A memory of Trajan begging him to save Probis. Dorian turned around, looking over at the body that was lying next to him. A body of a dead vampire. Asra, can I restore this vampire to life? He asked slowly, staring at the vampire, studying it. Asra was quiet for a moment. There appears to be some sort of time or stasis magic spell or artifact in effect on the corpse, preserving it. Because of this, the soul and soul spell matrix of the being is still present. Asra continued, with the energy you have remaining in your soul, it should be possible as long as you make physical contact. I would not need to run any complicated simulations. Asra finished. Dorian didn't hesitate, moving in the moment as he walked over and laid his hand on Probis' chest. Trajan, meanwhile, had just recovered fully. Air wheezed in and out of the rain wizard's chest as he gathered himself, looking about in a stupor. The restoration of his full, normal vision was like a wonder to him. Savio. Trajan spun around as he fully came to, cutting himself off as he looked at Dorian. Whoosh! White light and energy flooded off of Dorian's body as he concentrated, a torrent of energy once more flooding forward. Hundreds of thousands of growth points, dipping into millions, all left his soul, easing the pressure on him down to a much more bearable level. Live, he commanded probis. Asra helped him guide the energy, directing it to pull in probis' soul, to fully restore him. Probis' body shook slightly, light and energy fluttered under the dead vampire's eyelids as Dorian focused, a powerful aura flooding off of him. A tense second passed. Slowly, ever so slowly, Probis' chest rose, of his own volition. Dorian had brought the dead back to life. Probis, Probis. Trajan saw this, sensing a faint, weak life force appear, deep within the once dead swordmaster. Probis' eyes fluttered and then, quietly, opened up a crack. Trajan, Probis muttered, his voice weak and full of confusion. Probis. Trajan rushed forward, tears spilling from his eyes as he leapt towards his brother in arms and best friend, grasping his arm. Dorian watched this all, feeling the happiness and cheer the duo felt keenly. A female voice, calling out in pain, caught Dorian's attention. He reacted to this voice with haste as he rushed to the side, his body landing near a small pile of treasure. Helena, it's me, Dorian. Everything is going to be okay. I've got you. Also, Aaron says hi, he's safe too. Dorian grabbed on a hold of the still stunned female vampire, hugging her tightly. The shock of the injuries she'd suffered, and their abrupt reversal, had taken a heavy toll on her. Helena looked up at Dorian, her spirit calming as her eyes stared into his. Dorian, she whispered quietly. She looked around, first down at her hands, and then over at Trajan who was hugging and talking animatedly with a now living Probis. Dorian. Tears spilled from Helena's eyes as she buried her face in Dorian's chest, hugging him tightly. Dorian hugged her comfortingly, rubbing her head as the vampire broke down crying, the stress, pain, horror, and worry of the past few days and weeks sloughing off. As he hugged her, however, his face froze. For, a figure had risen up, standing a few meters away in front of him. The former body of Veritos, transformed into that of some type of light-aspected human. The figure slowly turned its head, revealing a handsome, masculine face with a strong jawline and long, pitch-black hair. A pair of golden eyes that seemed to glow faintly, accompanied by a small nose and confused smile. The figure stared at Dorian, looking at his body in confusion for a moment before a light in his eyes lit up, as if he was looking beyond Dorian's physical Ifrit form. Dorian? A familiar, unforgettable voice spoke aloud. Dorian smiled, an incredible sensation of joy and accomplishment spreading through him. He had succeeded. Will. In another section of the Ascension ruins, a very different scene was taking place. How dare you desecrate her body? You vile beast. Myra's voice was full of irrational rage as she threw enormous gouts of purple fire at an agilely dodging ancestral vampire. What appeared to be a royal crypt of some sort lay in shambles, wooden furniture and stone furniture broken or melted to bits, apparently not protected like the rest of the Ascension ruins. The crypt wasn't too large, only a few dozen meters long and wide, with a high ceiling. My apologies, fair dragon. But, as they say, the needy need what they need. Mello shrugged as he fled the crypt, holding a wrapped-up humanoid female form on his back. Mira sprinted out of the crypt after him, a calm and peaceful aura paradoxically spreading out as she screamed in rage, chasing after him. Deep in a dark corner of the Ascension ruins, Leader looked quietly at a glowing red bow, one that gave off a faint red light. Sitting next to this bow was the corpse of a red-scaled humanoid creature. A demon that Leader recognized, from his intensive studies of his forefathers, the ones who first mastered the laws he and his brethren studied. One of the 4 generals of the Demon Emperor. The archer General Huya. Leader stretched out a wavering hand, his breath bated as he looked at the bow. So this is what I would desire most in these ruins. I asked to be put somewhere where that shapeshifter wasn't, or with Mira. Not out here. Aiden cursed as he jogged back towards the castle of the Ascension ruins, irritation filling his tone. When he'd touched the door of splendor after completing the first trial, he had been transported to the farthest corner away from the castle that housed the bulk of the Ascension ruins. Damn it, Aidan swore again as he jogged back, contemplating switching into his draconic form. Henry, the scythe master serving under the Blazing King, swore as he rushed towards the main treasure depository. After exploring the ruins so many times, Henry was well aware of many of the secret locations, and the best places to explore for more complex trials. Clues about various laws could be found in plenty of areas, and dozens of unexplored challenges of trials that led to specific laws existed. Damn it, who is creating such a ruckus? He swore angrily as his body flashed through one stone corridor after another, his powerful late king-class aura surrounding him. His team had received a message that someone was trying to destroy the ruins themselves, something he absolutely could not allow. The Blazing King would have his head if he let that happen, especially considering the man was just outside, watching the ruins intently. At the very top of the Ascension Ruins castle, a large, sealed-off room could be found. This room was full of hundreds of mystical diagrams and symbols, glowing and seemingly made out of yellow energy. In the midst of this sealed-off room, a black-skinned man could be seen, fiddling with several of these floating matrices. Just a touch here, a tad there. A subtle, king-class aura rolled off the man as he spoke. And that should do it. The nameless monk smiled. I have finally done as you asked for in your last will, Thunder Saint Kaladin. The monk whispered quietly. Euclid's Ascension ruins are now set to self-destruct in just a few minutes. Chapter 145. Finale. End of Volume 5. Incredible. Darrell Bold looked on at everything, the incredible explosions of force and light, in sheer shock and awe. His face was pale, the king-class aura that surrounded him flickering. Men, retreat through the door. We'll conquer the trial with treasure next time. Darrell boldly ordered his men to escape, wanting nothing to do with what was happening. At the same time, he burned the image of the fierce warrior into his mind, a being named Dorian that shifted between different physical forms, bearing strength the likes of which he could not fathom. Dorian had snuffed out the soul and presence of an ominous king-class creature, one that even Darrell felt threatened by, with what looked to Darrell like a casual touch. Bright light and energy had exploded out of the creature, and immediately after, its presence vanished, destroyed. Fall back, we'll meet my brother in the courtyard. This was not the first time Darrell had been inside the Ascension ruins, nor would it be the last if he had any say in it. The older brother of their mercenary team was their leader and chief of intelligence. The news of a powerful king-class expert of Dorian's caliber was definitely bound to be worth a pretty penny to the various intelligence groups, both in and out of the Blue Moon Mercenary Alliance. Creak. At that exact moment, a loud, shuddering creak shook the air. Warbling energy seemed to cascade about in the air itself, painfully echoing in Darrell's ears. Heavens above, Darrell muttered, staring at the figure of Dorian as Darrell raced towards the leaving door. Dorian was still in his Ifrit form, hugging on to Helena. He actually is destroying the ruins. Will, Dorian smiled at the man, unable to hold back a grin. Good to see you again. He stroked Helena's head as he talked, still comforting her. She had gone through a lot of suffering in the past few weeks, it seemed. Heyo, Dorian. Will rubbed his forehead, looking around in a confused manner. He looked down at his body, dressed in only a loose gray robe, and at his lightly glowing hands. What happened? My last memory is of me jumping in front of you to stop that rampaging titan. I can vaguely recall being in a warm place, trying to hold back some fearsome darkness that felt dangerous. When Will had been connected to Dorian's soul, Will had been able to sense Euclid's presence. Will's soul focused on light and other things associated with it, and was naturally antithetical to Euclid's darkness, both literally and figuratively. The two presences had interacted, with Will inadvertently helping shield Dorian from Euclid's touch at times. A lot, buddy, quite a lot has happened, Dorian said, still smiling uncontrollably. Creak. A warbling echo crashed, causing everyone there to freeze. Raw energy ran flush in the background, moving towards a dangerous crescendo. Is that normal? Will looked around the treasure room, taking everything in as he adapted to being in his current body. Oh my, no, I don't think so. That can't be good, Dorian muttered, his eyes twitching. Whoosh! In the background, giant explosions echoed forth as several empty parts of the castle blew up, energy shaking the air itself. Crap, let's get out of here. We'll finish talking later. One could exit the trial by walking away from the castle, back outside. Once you got far enough away, you would be automatically transported atop the flame Empyrean turtle. Dorian had learned this in the process of preparing for this journey. If we can reach the exit of this room, I can activate an artifact that can help us all escape quickly. Helena had recovered enough to get back to her normal state, wiping her face as she stood up. A powerful, commanding air rose about the beautiful vampire as she stood up, giving Dorian a nod. All right, let's go. But first, Dorian jogged over to a spot a few meters away, where a spatial ring lay in a lonely pile of ash. He looked down at the pile, his face somber. Ariel's remains. When she had been absorbed by veritos, her body had fallen away to ash. Her soul spell matrix was long since gone. There was no chance he could bring her back. Dorian picked up the spatial ring from the pile, carrying it gently. He used it to store Ariel's remains, not leaving them behind. Inside it, he saw a large collection of what appeared to be vials of blood alongside several sets of clothes. He gave a quiet nod as he turned around, looking back at Helena and Will. Let's go. Trajan and Probis had finished their reunion as well, the duo grinning from ear to ear. So I was really dead? Probis asked as he stood up, stretching his arms. He was dressed in his customary light armor, with a blade strapped to his back. Dead as that wagon of endangered orange-tailed pigs that you accidentally destroyed back on Tintulo. Trajan said, a hint of his familiar humor coming back to him. Oi, those pigs had it coming. They literally did nothing but exist. They were orange, and, I don't like that color. The duo grumbled back and forth as they followed Helena and the others, their footsteps assured. Huge mountains of treasure still existed all around them, but neither of the vampires batted an eye. Is everything all right? Probis abruptly said, looking between Trajan and Helena. He could sense a certain distance there, as if the two weren't on friendly terms. A deep flash of red light glimmered in Trajan's eyes. Right, my friend, there is something I do need to tell you. It has to do with leaving the Aurelius family and joining another group. It also has to do with the ancestors and the ability to evolve our bloodlines into something greater, into that of an ancestral vampire. Whoosh! Dorian looked up at the ceiling, seeing faint dust particles drift downward. The entire castle was shaking, warbling back and forth in a confusing motion. Damn it, he mentally swore. He still had several million points of growth energy resting in his soul. If he was given free time, he could evolve several forms and then absorb more energy from the main treasure depository, potentially finding tons of new forms. Unfortunately, it seemed like fate wasn't going to give him that opportunity. In just a few moments, the group arrived at the leaving door. The other occupants in the treasure room had long since fled. All right, everyone, as long as you aren't carrying any treasure from the room, you should be able to be transported through the door. Dorian said aloud, turning back to look at Trajan and Probis. The duo nodded, listening attentively. I'll go first. Helena bravely stepped forward, laying her hand on the gold door. Whoosh! In an instant, her body was automatically teleported away, vanishing. All right, Will, you want to go next? Dorian said, turning to look at him. He clapped the man on the back, smiling uncontrollably. This had worked out perfectly. Sure, Will shrugged, rubbing his head again. He felt stuffy, his mind still trying to catch up. Everything around him felt different, even his body. It was like he had been viewing the world through a set of old, broken-down glasses before, but was now viewing it through the latest, state-of-the-art perfect vision enhancers, able to see things he'd never seen before. Without hesitating, though, Will stuck his hand out, resting it upon the door of leaving. Whoosh! He vanished as well. All right, you two, I'll go on ahead. Just follow us by putting your hand on the door. Dorian turned to look at the duo, nodding at them. No problem, boss man. Trajan replied. Dorian put his hand on the door. Whoosh! The world around him seemed to stretch. Then he, himself, stretched as well, feeling energy wash over his body. Brr! Dorian felt the slightest hint of resistance, trying to stop him from teleporting away. He frowned at that, immediately pushing the full force of his will to smash it aside. That resistance instantly folded, crushed by his command. That must have been the main part of the trial, Dorian realized as an afterthought. Since he hadn't taken any treasure from the room with him, he didn't have to deal with anything that was too difficult to move past. After he smashed that aside, Dorian's body vanished from inside the main treasure depository and reappeared in an extremely tense scene. That's the one, Scythe Master. Darrell Bold's hands trembled in fear as he pointed at Dorian's Ifrit form. The main treasure depository opened up into a grand, but indoors, courtyard, covered with a long, arching stone roof. The ground was covered in a lush, red carpet, and several exquisite paintings hung on the wall, between glowing crystal torches. Several figures currently stood, facing off against each other. Helena and Will stood looking at several other figures, their guard up. That one? A rippling, fiery late king-class aura burst forth from a red-haired man wearing a dark burgundy suit, wielding a long metal scythe. The air around this man seemed as if it was about to burst into flames, shivering with danger. This man was standing next to a few other figures, one of whom Dorian recognized. The man with the chess-piece-like hair. Species: human. Class: king class, late. Maximum energy level: 1,412,881. Damn it, why am I hitting all of this bad luck? Come on, fate, twist in my favor. Dorian swore as he saw the hostile, and extremely strong, king-class fighter. Yes, Scythe Master, Darrell responded, backing up in fear as Dorian turned and gave him a glare. How dare you destroy the ruins? Do you have any idea what you've done? The Blazing King is not a figure you, or even I, can survive angering. I may very well die because of you. Henry stalked forward, his voice filled with raw anger. Hold on, I didn't destroy anything. This happened Weetho. Dorian began trying to explain himself, holding his hands up. Boom. Before he could finish, however, the Scythe Master attacked, a rippling wave of fire shooting out of his metal scythe as he casually cut towards Dorian with it. Boom. Before the flames could reach Dorian, however, a shockwave burst into the air as Helena jumped to his defense, unleashing a powerful impact. Half the force of the Scythe Master's attack dissipated, falling to the wayside. I will not let you hurt him. Helena's eyes glowed as a unique, king-class aura of her own broke forth. HMPH, you've only barely broken through, don't act like you can match up against me. Henry returned, his scythe whipping around to go on guard as Helena leapt at him, unleashing a flurry of blows. Meanwhile, the broiling flames slammed into Dorian, who had opted not to dodge, washing over his Ifrit body. The cutting impact from the attack had been blocked by Helena, leaving only the burning essence. Hot, Dorian thought, feeling the flames rock against him. This fire was infused with the law of fire, containing the raw power of law within it. Despite that, it was unable to hurt him. His Ifrit form was largely immune to most types of flames, save, perhaps, dragonfire. Whoosh! Two more figures appeared in the courtyard, one after another. Trajan and Probis. Hup! Helena grunted as she was blown backwards, her hands covered in small, bleeding cuts. Don't think you can escape, brats. It's my head at risk here. You're coming with me to see your fate whether you like it or not. The Scythe Master was incensed, practically spitting as he raged at them. He was apparently fully convinced that they were responsible for the currently shaking Ascension ruins. Kriak, shudder. A second warbling echo rose through the air. This one, however, caused space itself to shudder. It was an incredibly unsettling experience, one that made Dorian feel as if he was about to throw up. His body felt like it was in several spots at once. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions began to echo out, growing louder and louder as the Ascension ruins began to literally explode. Several spots in the ruins were protected, namely the places with ancient law inheritances. But every other place began to detonate, collapsing in on itself. Darrell Bold and the other onlookers had fled, retreating out of the castle as fast as possible. We need to go, now. Dorian yelled out loud. He could feel that the place they were standing in was about to explode. He immediately ran over towards Will, grabbing a hold of him. The human was looking about in confusion still, not yet used to being alive again. You aren't going anywhere. The enraged Scythe Master ignored the impending spatial destruction, dashing forward to attack once more. Boom. Another explosion, however, drove him temporarily off balance, causing him to come to a stop. Quickly, I can get us out of here with an artifact. Helena dodged backwards, landing down on the ground next to Dorian. As she turned to motion towards Trajan and Probis, however, she realized something. The duo had already left. Huh? She looked around in surprise. The two vampires were well aware that Helena had an ancient inheritance treasure that could be used for fleeing. Yet, they had opted to quietly leave on their own, separating themselves. No time, Helena. Activate it. Let's go, Dorian yelled. Around them, the air was starting to spark, raw bolts of energy flying. A melting smell spread as space itself began to fluctuate. Not on my watch, Henry muttered, throwing his own personal safety to the wind. If he didn't capture at least one of the perpetrators, Henry had no doubt the Blazing King would take his anger out on him. Molten Scythe Technique. Volcano Slash. Henry cut down with his metal scythe, bringing it down as if it carried the weight of an entire volcano. A huge, brilliant slash of white light sailed forward, cutting through the air itself as it sailed towards Dorian. The slash was infused with a vast amount of mystic energy, carrying enough force to easily split a mountain, and moved at an incredibly fast pace. Perfect Body, activate. Dorian activated his Perfect Body ability just in time, feeling the world around him slow, color fading as his physique was vastly enhanced. Whoa! The attack crossed the distance between them in an instant. Before Helena could activate her artifact, her hand just now grasping around the bracelet, Dorian forcibly pushed Will to the side. Whoosh! Boom! An explosion of fiery energy sounded off behind them as the scythe attack left a huge, black scar on the extremely tough rocky ground, throwing up a storm of wind. The attack had been aimed right towards Dorian and Will. By pushing Will to the side, Dorian managed to just barely dodge the attack. The attack had moved with such speed and force, it would have been impossible to react to without his Perfect Body ability active. Escape. Helena activated the Capitoline Wolf bracelet in that instant, her eyes widening in shock as she saw the attack fly by and Dorian push Will away. A small dot of gray light touched Helena's forehead, shooting from the bracelet at light speed. This dot then moved over, touching Dorian's forehead. When it tried to move to touch Will's forehead, several meters away, however. Shudder, 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 shudder. Space began to shudder over and over, making everyone there stop attacking as their molecules themselves were distorted. Dorian felt pain in his soul as his body vibrated. At the same time, the dot of gray light fizzled out, unable to reach Will. Crack. A huge, energy-full crack appeared in space, just a few meters in front of him. Oh dear. Dorian stared at it. The crack stared back, energy boiling within it. The sounds of explosions happening all around the castle made sense as Dorian saw this. The energy in this crack had reached a huge, abnormally concentrated amount, containing enough explosive force that it should be able to obliterate even the abnormally tough stone that made up the Ascension ruins. Dorian, and everyone watching, knew for a fact that they had less than a second before it exploded. He turned his head around, desperately looking at Will. It was too late for him to move. The bracelet had already activated, energy swarming around him and Helena, starting to transport them away. No, he had just saved Will. Was he about to lose him all over again? Whoosh. Ah yes, it seems like I made it in time. Dorian heard a voice echo out, a being talking extremely fast yet also slow, understandable in the split second that they had left. A lithe, staff-wielding monkey landed on the ground next to Will, appearing from seemingly nowhere. The monkey had a large necklace of fist-sized beads wrapped around his neck and a friendly smile on his face. I got you. Sun Wukong smiled as he grabbed a hold of Will. The monkey's eyes seemed to flash with knowledge as he turned and looked at Dorian, all in that accelerated split second. He gave Dorian a friendly thumbs up. As Sun Wukong grabbed a hold of Will, Will stared at the monkey in shock. Deep within Will's eyes, an alien darkness tried to stir. Darkness that was immediately forced down by the holy light that was infused in Will's body. And I have you now too, Ukeli. You can't escape from me. Sun Wukong's eyes turned cold. When Dorian had cleansed Veritos' body to resurrect Will, he had cast out the soul of Veritos, destroying it. Unbeknownst to Dorian, however, there had been something left behind. Something he had been unable to wipe out, hidden from his eyes. The remnants of Ukeli. Every anomaly had a piece of Ukeli merged with their soul. Dorian was able to destroy Veritos, but he couldn't destroy Euclid's soul, not even when there was only a small shred of it remaining. Through a twist of fate, that remnant was still there, present on Will's new body. But Will was not an anomaly. His soul and soul spell matrix could not evolve. Therefore, the remnant was unable to merge or do much of anything to Will at all. Shudder. Space fractured. Will and Sun Wukong vanished. Henry, the Scythe Master, retreated furiously, blood spurting out of his body as he threw up protective artifact after artifact, expending his every iota of late king-class energy, trying to survive. He had stayed too long in his anger, something that might have gotten him killed. Helena and Dorian vanished as well, the energy in Helena's artifact warping them away. However, as space fractured, the blip of energy that was Helena and Dorian being transported seemed to vibrate along fractured space. And, instead of returning to the city of Tomo like Helena planned, their blip of energy shot off into fractured space. And vanished, off and away to destinations unknown. Boom! Explosions of light and energy shook the air as the castle folded in on itself, destruction inherent. Everything within the confines of the castle was turned to dust, save for the stores of knowledge and law inheritances that were previously locked away. These were transported, vanishing from the collapsing ruins. The Ascension ruins, in all their dangerous glory, collapsed. And were no more. The space that held the ruins began to collapse, as well as all the participants that had managed to survive the castle's collapse escaped. A black-skinned monk looked on at all of this, his eyes somber. My apologies to those that died. I could not delay, not any further, and I doubt any of you would have listened to me. He sighed. Kaladin, I have done your will. The ruins are destroyed, the law inheritances sent to the monastery. He bowed his head and walked away, his body vanishing into the fog as he exited the collapsing space. We must no longer hide such knowledge, but spread it freely, openly, for the end times are upon us. The 30,000 worlds must prepare. That was it, my prince. The beast that tried to slaughter us. You have fought with a great evil. Jasper's voice was full of fervor as he spoke to Isaac. Holy Prince Isaac frowned, rubbing his exhausted eyes as he looked around. They had just barely managed to escape the Ascension ruins, a set of ruins that had decided to explode for some reason. He'd lost track of Veritos and the creature he had fought. He'd only barely managed to find his comrades, all of them miraculously having safely fled the ruins. The shades were all standing atop the enormous flame Empyrean turtle now, on its southern side. We should fall back for now, Holy Prince. Standing atop this huge beast is unsafe. Geralf's gruff voice broke in, frowning as well. Tap tap. Before Isaac could respond, however, a light tapping noise rang out as a figure landed down on the ground near them. A robed man giving off a powerful, dangerous aura, carrying what appeared to be a wrapped-up body on his shoulder. A body that was giving off an even more powerful aura, one that made Isaac sit up, feeling a very real sense of danger. I believe you have someone that belongs to me. Mello's voice was smooth as it rolled off his ancestral vampire form's tongue. Are we really just retreating now? Taman sputtered as he looked at the head of his department in annoyance. His eyes were cold, anger and irritation filling him. Hick, yes we are. Jiro cheerfully responded, his eyes unwavering as they jumped from rock to rock, several miles away from the towering flame Empyrean turtle in the background. It's that or we fight the almighty ruler of the Graal Alliance. Jiro shrugged. Besides, that monkey shared some information that must be reported immediately, information that Telman would want to know. Jiro's eyes flashed as he turned to look back at the huge turtle briefly. Interesting information indeed. Aiden took several deep breaths as he rested atop a collection of boulders not far from the flame Empyrean turtle, his eyes cold with anger. How dare that creature desecrate her body? We will find him and destroy him immediately. Aiden sputtered with rage, a majestic king-class aura rippling off his body as he cursed at Mello. Standing next to him was a silently concentrating Mira, looking intently at a large, jade-colored scale that had hundreds of intricate patterns carved into it. It fit snugly into the palm of her hand. The communication scale artifact, a mystical object that allowed for snippets of information to be transported across worlds, that she had used before. Aiden, I've received word from the tribe. Myra's voice sounded off to Aiden, as if full of shock and horror. Aiden paused in his rant as he turned to look at Mira, a confused expression on his face as he heard the odd tone she spoke with. What of it? We can't go back now, not when we found Lady Osra's corpse. We must bring it back with us to put her to rest proper. Aiden, we must return. Myra's hands trembled as she spoke, her entire body shaking. Aiden immediately jumped forward, grabbing a hold of her and supporting her. Mira, what is it? His heart dropped as he spoke, feeling a sense of foreboding rise. It's the Heavy Wing tribe. Her voice was a whisper. Yes? What of it? Is their dragon master all right? Aiden could faintly remember Mira telling him that one of the Heavy Wing tribe headquarters had been attacked by some gigantic lion-type beast. The Heavy Wing tribe was one of the 12 draconic tribes, a massive, powerful force within the tribes that had hundreds of dragons in it, dozens at the king class. The Dragon Master was a powerful, pseudo-angelic expert, one of the strongest drakes in the entire 12 tribes. They're dead. The Dragon Master has died? Aiden spurted, his eyes widening in shock. Not just him, Aiden. Mira said, her voice shuddering. All of them, she continued, tears falling from her eyes. The Heavy Wing tribe has been wiped out. Ah, a man with long white hair and a handsome, muscular appearance exhaled softly, looking down at his hands. He wore a vest of white pants that covered his lower half and nothing else, his thick, burly chest rippling with energy and strength. He had a strong jawline and a blocky nose, with a pair of golden eyes that carried with them such force of will that it seemed he could make reality itself follow his command with a single glance. This man looked away from his hands, over to a huge pile of corpses off to his right. He was sitting on a wide, white stone mountain peak, in the middle of a mostly destroyed mountain range. The signs of a huge battle could be seen all around him. Large holes that had blasted through several mountains, enormous gouges in the earth that went on for miles and miles. A fight of such scale it was unfathomable had taken place here, destroying dozens of miles of land. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten. The man spoke aloud as he stood up. Your bodies have fueled my merging with your bloodline. My main form has grown stronger, far more defensive and tough. I've gained abilities, like this convenient humanoid form. The man continued, stepping forward to look at one corpse in particular. The remains of a huge, towering gray-scaled dragon, with wings that looked as if they had a wingspan of 200 meters. A beast that, even now, with only bones left, gave off an aura that caused the air to shiver. I am confident that if I were to face that fearsome monkey again, he would not be able to blow me away and injure me again, not with such ease. The man smiled. He frowned, however, as he remembered fighting against Sun Wukong, and the terrible force the monkey had held with such casual ease, not even the slightest sign of strain. But I will not go for him, not yet. The man's eyes narrowed as he turned to look in a specific direction. It is time for my brethren to join with me and increase my power. I will come for you when I am ready, monkey. Zero nodded his head, the smile returning to his face. And I can sense one of my own among another of the tribes. The Red Wing tribe, yes? Zero took a step forward, turning to look back at the hundreds of dragon corpses he had laid out, all around the mountain. A veritable valley of death, great leviathans of the sky with shattered spines, proud majesty dashed to the base earth. A slaughter of an entire species, a species that had ruled with impunity. The 12 tribes were now 11. Be ready, my brothers and sisters. Prepare yourselves. Resist me with all of your might, grow as powerful as possible. Zero muttered, walking to the edge of the peak. For I am coming for you. Chapter 146. Landed. Thunk, swish, thunk, swish, thunk, swish. A repetitive pattern of noise filled the still, evening air. A swish and then a thunk. Over and over, these two noises switched back and forth. Finally, the noise stopped. Sigh. Dorian flicked out his hands, washing away any stray dirt or grass. He then rubbed his forehead and eyes, feeling tired as he looked around. His black-skinned Ifrit form had a set of clawed fingers and was suited for the task at hand. He was currently standing in a large grassy meadow. Behind him, a small forest of oak trees could be seen, spaced intermittently. A long dirt path led through the forest and continued onward, a lonely road that meandered about the meadow and onto a large plain. Dorian shook his head, returning his focus downward, towards a large hole he had just finished digging in the ground. A large rock, shaped roughly like a rectangle, was set in the ground just above the hole. With a smooth flip of his wrist, Dorian pulled out a small woolen bag from his spatial ring. The bag was tied shut, made of a fine material. Its brown covering moved slowly as a breeze swept through the meadow. Burnt onto the bag was a small letter, A. Dorian sighed for a second time. He put the bag in the ground, setting it down carefully. Then, slowly, he began to cover the hole up, kneeling down as he dragged the nearby dirt to cover it. In no time at all, the bag was completely covered, not a trace of it visible. Dorian patted the earth lightly, smoothing out the edges. He pushed some of the torn-up grass over the spot, making it blend in. He then raised his right hand, resting it on the rectangular piece of rock from above the hole. He trailed a finger onto it. Ability, activate, flaming claws. Dorian activated one of his abilities. Immediately, his right hand's claws became superheated, turning a bright red. His ifrit body handled the heat well, with complete ease as he began to trace out several words onto the piece of stone. After a moment of writing, he stepped back, looking at his handiwork. The energy from the Law of Wrath faded, vanishing away. Here rests the ashes of one whom fate dealt a hand no being would desire. Her life was hard and the choices she had to make harder. Let it be said, however, that when everything came to a head, she stayed true to her spirit. She did what she believed was right, even in death. She may no longer walk these lands, but she will not be forgotten. Here lies the grave of Ariel Vich, a Lightsworn fox. Dorian took another step back, taking a deep breath. He bowed his head silently, in gratitude and in respect. Ariel had saved his, Helena, and Trajan's life, as well as Wool and Probis. She had betrayed him, but she had also saved him. The least he could do was honor her memory. As he looked at the grave he'd made for her, he decided to say a few words. There is a legend in this universe, Ariel. That life itself is part of a great cycle. The cycle of reincarnation, of the heavens, of life. Your time in this life has ended, but there will always be the next. He bowed his head again. I think you and I could have been friends, in another life. He sighed. Another quiet breeze swept through the valley as Dorian stood looking at her grave, his spirit somber. The dying light of the evening landed on her gravestone, causing it to shimmer slightly, almost as if it were crying. Go in peace. Dorian nodded his head sharply and turned around, taking a deep breath. He steeled his heart. He hadn't known Ariel for a long time, and for most of that he had hated the fox. But she had redeemed herself in the end, and for that, he would grieve. He would have given her a second chance if possible. Everyone deserved one. Dorian walked away from the grave, his eyes calm. His movements were sure as he left the center of the meadow, headed towards the nearby oak forest. After a few minutes of walking, he came upon a small, makeshift campsite. A very large oak tree had several 2-meter-wide branches several meters above ground level. On it, the pale figure of a vampire could be seen, resting quietly. She was wrapped up in a cloak, using it as a blanket, with a few sets of clothes lying under her head as a pillow. Helena? Dorian looked at the sleeping figure, her face covered in a sheen of sweat, with concern. Slowly, Helena's eyes opened. Dorian felt like he was looking into an entire world of depth and emotion as he looked back. Did you bury her? Helena whispered, her voice frail and quiet. Her entire body seemed to be sickly and ill. Yes. Dorian's response was quiet as he walked forward. His body transformed, going to his wrath vampire form. He jumped up onto the side of the tree and then flipped over to an unoccupied spot on a nearby branch. Helena, even as deathly ill as she was, blushed slightly at the handsome appearance Dorian now bore. Good. She was not a friend, but she deserved a warrior's burial. Helena nodded firmly before closing her eyes. Do you feel any better? Are the pills helping? Dorian asked, rubbing his chin. They have helped somewhat. I can move my arms and legs slightly. Helena's voice was full of cheer as she waved at Dorian lamely, her right arm flopping vigorously like a limp, but passionate, noodle. Dorian couldn't help but snort at the ridiculous sight. Helena burst out laughing with him, her voice a melody in the air. Immediately after, however, her face seemed to grow paler, as if in exertion. Keep resting, Helena. Focus on recovery. I'll keep guard. Dorian patted her head comfortingly, something Helena glared at him for, before he jumped down to sit on the ground next to the tree. Fine, Helena whispered as she closed her eyes, quickly falling asleep. Dorian listened to her breathing as she calmly lost consciousness, her body focused on recovering. He sighed. How did it end up like this? He muttered, rubbing his eyes, his mind flashing back. When Helena had activated her ancient inheritance artifact, she had intended for them to escape off to Tomo City. The Ascension ruins seemed to be collapsing around them and were definitely not a safe place to be at, especially with the murderous Scythe Master of the Blazing King attacking and trying to capture them. The artifact had managed to grab Dorian and Helena, but had failed to snag Will. Thankfully, another figure had appeared, a monkey, of all things, and rescued Will, vanishing with him. According to Helena, that monkey was none other than the almighty ruler of the Graal Alliance. Sun Wukong, one of the 5 great heroes of the Third Demon War, and one of Euclid's comrades. Dorian had no idea what the monkey wanted with Will and had no chance to stop him. The pent-up frustration he felt was only mitigated by the fact that at least Will was alive again. After that, Helena and Dorian had vanished, blasting off away. However, something went wrong. Instead of appearing in Tomo City like Helena had planned, they appeared in some type of mysterious place, full of chaotic, flashing lights and bolts of rippling energy. Unbeknownst to them, they had entered a spatial fracture and were moving through chaotic space. The duo was protected by the power of Helena's artifact for a time as they sailed through chaotic space. The inheritance treasure was truly a powerful one, worthy of its age and stature. Eventually, however, that protection wore off, with no end in sight. Helena and Dorian were acutely aware of their surroundings as they were transported. The instant that protection faded, both were aware that their physical forms would be obliterated by the chaotic space environment. Rippling spatial storms, bolts of energy, spatial fractures, the list went on. Thus, Helena activated the artifact a second time. This time, however, her bracelet seemed to shiver. It was not an artifact that could last forever. With this final use, the artifact broke, several points around the bracelet cracking irreparably. It could not be used again. Still, the protection it offered shielded them as they blazed forward, moving in the same direction at an incredibly fast speed. They passed a myriad of shapes and types of light. Mighty explosions of energy, giant orbs of red fire, mysterious circles of black darkness. The chaotic space around them was a wonderland of both beauty and danger. Eventually, their protection was about to run dry once more. With the energy stores of the artifact depleted, Helena did the only thing she could. She fueled it using the energy of her soul spell matrix. At first, it went perfectly well. Helena had recently broken into King class and had a plethora of energy. Eventually, however, her energy stores began to run dry. The energy the broken artifact demanded to protect them was enormous and not something she could give off infinitely. Dorian could sense all of this as it took place. Helena's soul writhed as energy flooded out of it. Her soul itself actually began to take damage, starting to wither. The wounds Helena was sustaining weren't permanent, not yet, but if they grew worse, she would inevitably become crippled and die. No, Dorian had thought and instantly jumped forward as he felt Helena waver. He did everything he could to help her, trying to will the energy of his soul to power the artifact, drawing upon the laws of valor and wrath as much as possible. In terms of raw energy, Dorian couldn't match the output of Helena's King-class soul spell matrix. It was true that he had studied 2 laws to the point where he could draw from them, but that wasn't enough. As Dorian felt Helena waver, their bodies still shooting through the cosmos, he tried something he was unsure would work and tapped into the growth energy of his soul, trying to use that as fuel. To his surprise, the growth energy worked. Dorian still had several million points of it saved up. By drawing upon that massive store of energy, Dorian was able to functionally power the artifact. Growth energy could be absorbed from artifacts and, functionally, that energy could be returned as well. Whoosh! Energy drained from Dorian's soul at a huge rate. The strain Helena felt, however, was greatly lessened. Her soul was still being drawn upon, as the controller of the artifact, but she was no longer forced to bear a burden that would kill her. Time moved on and so did they. They continued to travel through space at an impossibly fast speed. Eventually, just as Dorian was starting to worry that they would never stop, a massive flash of white light had blinded him. A millisecond later, Dorian had found himself falling towards the ground from 1,000 meters high in the air, right above a small forest and a large, sweeping grass plain. His head was in a stupor from the long travel through chaotic space. However, he managed to keep enough of his sensibilities about him to notice that Helena was falling right next to him. And unlike him, Helena appeared to be unconscious. Black-scaled rage dragon. Go! Dorian instantly had transformed, scooping up Helena and protecting her. He held her body delicately as he half fell half glided towards the ground, his mind still in a confused haze. Boom! Dorian had landed roughly, knocking over several large oak trees. His body felt numb, blocking out the impacts as he crashed. He held Helena protectively the entire time, shielding her from everything as he took the brunt of the blow. After that, he curled up and passed out. Several hours had passed before Dorian came to. Dorian's body had automatically repaired itself, the energy in his soul healing him, as well as his own powerful regenerative properties. It was then that he'd noticed his surroundings and Helena's situation. He was in a forest of some type, a normal one, unlike the fiery world of Magmoor. They had been transported off-planet. Helena was unconscious and sickly, sweat covering her body. Dorian had immediately set about tending to her, trying to aid her. He'd fed her almost every pill he had, filling her body with energy. According to Osra, Helena's soul was damaged. It had undergone a type of withering, overdrawing upon her life force to power an artifact. As a result, her physical body withered with her. However, given time and careful aid, it was possible that she could fully recover. As a true vampire, Helena's regenerative properties were powerful. Her soul was badly damaged, but as a king-class wizard, she could draw upon her law of might to imbue her soul with energy, slowly restoring it. Her withered body would recover alongside that. All she needed was time. His pills and efforts seemed to have helped speed up the process. If he could get higher quality pills, or perhaps a wizard that was specialized in damage to the soul or healing magic, it would increase further. As of right now, according to Osra, at the rate Helena was currently healing, it would take her several months to recover half her strength. It would take nearly a year before she recovered 80% of her strength. Still, Dorian muttered, his voice full of relief and gratefulness. You're alive, and that is all that matters. K-E-E-E. In the background, a monstrous beast roared, an echoing sound that rang through the forest, full of threat. Dorian's eyes narrowed as he heard this, an indescribable feeling of fierceness appearing. And not a single creature will harm a hair on your body, not when I am here to protect you. Indescribable valor filled Dorian's heart as he spoke, the air near him trembling. His eyes flashed. Power. He needed power, and he needed it immediately. The teleportation and soaring through chaotic space had sapped some of his growth energy. But not all of it. He still had an enormous amount left, more than 1 million points. It was time to make use of that and evolve. The Shade Commune was a force that controlled more than 2,000 worlds, the eastern side of the 30,000 worlds. The commune was ruled by the Shade King, and while he was a figure of significant might, his rule was not absolute. Under the king were the 6 Dukes of Shadow, as well as the Church of Light. Each duke controlled 100 to 300 individual worlds of that 2,000, using their own physical might or wizardry to consolidate their rule, alongside their own private shadow armies. The dukes were unified in their opposition to the Shade King's absolute rule, eventually leading to a tenuous truce. The Shade King commanded their race and the dukes would aid the king in war, but they had relative sovereignty in their own territories. The Church of Light had no say in that, though had considerable influence within each duchy as well. At the very easternmost portion of the 30,000 worlds, a cluster of 160 separate worlds was ruled over by Duke Orbit, one of the 6 Dukes of Shadow. Duke Orbit ruled from the exotic world of Shadowdale, a unique world that was very similar to normal worlds, in size and scale. What made it exotic was that instead of rain or hail, the weather on Shadowdale was made up of shadow energy and darkness energy. This energy was calm and welcoming, however, transforming the world into a paradise for shadow or darkness aspected beings as well as wizards that studied either branch. The biggest city on Shadowdale was the city of Mapire, where Orbit ruled from. It was a huge city, stretching for miles and miles, with a population exceeding 10 million. In the center of this city, a large black mansion jutted from the ground, surrounded by red and green trees, at odds with the much darker shadow or darkness aspected trees that made up most of the flora on Shadowdale. In a room in this mansion, a heavy-set shade could be seen, reclining comfortably on a large couch. The shade was fat, but also muscular, giving him a rather large stature. He wore a set of purple robes and languished slothfully on the couch, eating a few grapes that were offered to him by a pale-faced woman sitting next to him. The room was decorated lavishly and appeared to be a study of sorts. A fireplace burned comfortably not far from the couch, while various bookcases lined the walls. A table sat in front of the couch, decorated in gold and studded with jewels. Various paintings hung on the walls, of previous Shade Dukes or other members of Duke Orbit's family. Sitting on a wooden chair, looking intently at the languishing man, was a weaselly-looking shade attendant wearing a set of black robes, reading from a sheaf of papers. "Ah, Tarvin, so the war efforts have gone well for His Highness thus far?" The overweight shade said, popping another grape into his mouth. His words were jovial and relaxed, as if he was worried about nothing at all. Beneath the friendly exterior and easygoing nature, however, a tone of firm steel existed, unbending. "Yes, Duke Orbit," Tarvin responded, his voice slightly nasal. "His Highness is currently engaged with all 3 vampire families. The nobles have provided stiff resistance, but His Highness has made progress. 6 worlds have been captured. 4 from the Augustus family and 2 from the Aurelius family, while none were captured from the Caesar family. His Highness has also suffered substantial losses, stalling the efforts slightly." Orbit nodded as he heard the news, his face calm. "Good, good. It seems the taxes I'm sending to His Highness are not being wasted. If His Highness were to act directly, he could surely break the stalemate. But the 3 vampire high lords and their private elites are no joke. Taking it slow is probably for the best, even if they are the weakest major power." He rubbed his chin. Tarvin nodded and continued. "In respect of the war efforts, we have captured all true vampires and related subspecies discovered within the duchy, totaling several hundred across all worlds. Several of the captured prisoners have provided excellent information on the inner goings-on of the affairs of the Augustus and Aurelius families. Almost all humanoids within the Shade commune were members of the Shade race. The Shades were very exclusive to their own kind, often viewing foreigners with distrust. As a result, extremely few members of other races would choose to settle within the Shade commune. Considering that Orbit oversaw 160 entire worlds full of people, several hundred true vampires was therefore not a large number at all. "Good. Send the intelligence to His Highness and keep them imprisoned. If any resist, execute them. For those that don't, they are to be held until the war is over. I will not risk spies of any sort ruining the war effort." Orbit's words were stern. While he didn't necessarily support all of the king's actions, at the end of the day, they were still part of the same race. It wouldn't do for His Highness to lose the war. Just as he was about to continue, Orbit froze, his eyes widening in surprise. A flash of white energy appeared and vanished in his eyes as the look of shock on his face vanished. "Alia, leave." Orbit's entire demeanor seemed to change as he turned to look at the female attendant that was feeding him grapes. Immediately the female shade got up and left, her face demure as she exited the study. "Duke Orbit?" Tarvin looked at the man questioningly, shifting the sheaves of paper in his hand about nervously. Orbit turned to look at his attendant. As he did so, a hint of a unique aura burst out around him. An aura that was full of slow, lazy power, building up to a mighty force that seemed as if it could blow away mountains with ease. This aura vanished an instant later. "Tarvin, I need you to send a message to the council." For the briefest moment, I felt a presence traveling at great speed, headed towards one of the easternmost worlds under my reign, through chaotic space of all things. A smile appeared on Orbit's face. Orbit was powerful, but he was not a god. He could not detect the presence of random beings from so far away. He could only sense a being from such distance if that creature resonated with him in some powerful, unique way, as if that creature was expending a huge amount of energy that he could detect. An inheritor of wrath has finally reappeared. Chapter 147. Upgrade. It was time to evolve. First, Dorian pulled out Ariel's spatial ring. In it, Dorian had found several vials of blood, each of them sealed with some type of mystical matrix. He withdrew them now, tapping lightly on the top of one of them. Whoosh! Immediately, whatever magic seal had blocked the vial vanished, faint particles of light drifting into the air. "Huh, what are you?" Dorian thought, his curiosity aroused. He opened the vial up, examining the blood. It looked like blood. He didn't know what he had expected. Absorb. The blood in the vial vanished. An instant later, Osra's voice rang out. Bloodline of Lightsworn Fox partially absorbed. Absorb more to fully form the bloodline. Dorian's eyes widened. According to Osra, a Lightsworn Fox's bloodline was unique. The only way for him to gain it was for him to either absorb a Lightsworn Fox's soul spell matrix, or bleed them for an extended period and get it that way. The uses for a Lightsworn Fox's bloodline weren't limited to this, however. It had a number of uses in necromancy and blood magic, and was a sought-after rarity. The major downside to the bloodline was that it lost its effectiveness over time. As Dorian looked at the vials of blood, he realized what Ariel had done. She was aware of the value of her blood and preemptively stored it in vials, and then had those sealed with time magic. No, Dorian frowned as he looked at this, shaking his head. Why would she do that to herself? Ah, he muttered, coming to a depressing realization. It was likely that it wasn't she who'd created the vials. Given her past, Dorian guessed she hadn't given up her blood willingly either. Ariel had been hunted for killing several shades. As Dorian looked at these expertly crafted vials of blood, a picture became painted in his mind. Of Ariel being held captive and slowly bled, forced to give up her blood as shade blood or necromancy wizards stored the vials with time magic, preserving it. Of her killing her captors and escaping, turning into a hunted fugitive. Perhaps the story was different, in one way or another. Dorian felt like his guess was very close to the truth, however, if not spot on. You really didn't have it easy, huh? He muttered softly, rubbing one of the vials. He sighed. Absorb. Pshhhhh. Dorian absorbed all of the remaining blood in each and every one of the vials, just barely gaining enough. Lightsworn Fox bloodline acquired. Dorian's expression was mixed as he fully gained the Lightsworn Fox bloodline. It was a powerful, pseudo-lord class bloodline with a unique ability, touching light, that was very powerful. I'll put it to good use. He nodded sharply. First, let's grow it fully. Dorian began to pour growth points into the bloodline. Dorian's body transformed into that of a majestic white fox, covered in faint particles of light. Dorian reverted to his wrath vampire form right after, not wanting to stretch his clothes out overly much despite their magical properties. It also looked weird to see a fox wearing pants and a shirt. It felt weird to Dorian, anyway. Lightsworn Fox. Growth stage, 4 quarters, Lightsworn Elder. Growth progress 487,122/0. Fully grown. Dorian smiled. Touching light, activate. Ability. Touching light. A unique ability to the Lightsworn Fox race. Touching light allows a Lightsworn Fox to manipulate particles of light. This often takes the form of weapons created out of pure light, weapons that hold extremely high temperatures, second only to black gold dragonfire. Any type of light can be manipulated, including light that was not created by the Lightsworn Fox, or light that is imbued with the power of law. Whoosh! A small dagger of light appeared in Dorian's hand, one that was about the length of his hand. As Dorian called it into existence, he felt a noticeable, but not extreme, drain on his soul spell matrix. Ooh, Dorian muttered as he waved the blade around, feeling its incredible heat. The blade itself, and the heat from it, didn't seem to be able to hurt his hand or arm that was holding the blade. The ability protected his hand and arm. It did nothing for the rest of his body, Dorian noted, as he held his other hand near the blade and immediately pulled it back. The heat from the small dagger was mostly self-contained, but just getting near it gave an incredible sense of danger. Biz. Dorian extended the dagger, pushing it into a full blade just shorter than a meter. It was thin, closer to a rapier or a very fine sword than a broadsword. Abruptly, another realization hit Dorian. No way. He swung the blade a few times. I have a lightsaber now. His mind instantly went to the lightsabers that the Jedi wielded in the movie series Star Wars back on Earth. Whoosh, whoosh. Dorian swung the blade back and forth, smiling cheerfully. He jumped around a bit, pretending to be a Jedi. Ha ha ha, alright, that's enough for now. He cancelled the ability. It drained roughly 1,000 points of energy a minute to keep it active, but with Dorian's sizable store of energy, it wasn't too large a draw. Next, Osra, I want you to combine my bloodlines to form the ancestral vampire form. Acknowledged, Osra replied. Ancestral vampire. Lord class, early. Maximum energy level. 28,164. Ability. Blood sense, constant regeneration, bat transformation, blood contract, demonic eyes, exuberant grace. Ancestral vampires are an ancient and nearly extinct form of vampire. They were the originators, the first of the vampire race, the true royals. They possess several powerful abilities that sets them apart from regular true vampires and are an innately noble race. Powerful and agile, long-lived and wily, they are a terrible foe to make enemies with. Breeding and conceiving a child is excessively difficult for ancestral vampires. The ancestral vampire bloodline was one he'd gained the ability to evolve into a while ago. Dorian had opted not to, however, choosing the Wrath vampire as his primary humanoid form and using his Ifrit form as his secondary magic form. His black-scaled rage dragon was his ultimate offensive form, should he need to go all out. Dorian had realized, however, that while the Ifrit bloodline was powerful and especially suited for fire magic, it was geared primarily towards fire magic. Dorian had learned several fire magic spells, but he wouldn't consider himself an expert, even if the Ifrit was fire aspected. The ancestral vampire, on the other hand, was aspected to nothing. While it, as all vampires, had a natural innate ability to manipulate blood and were adept at blood magic, in terms of law sensory power, ancestral vampires were both very attuned to the environment and not aspected towards any particular law. Dorian had decided to take on the form, adding it to his collection. When he wanted to practice magic or study something, or just to have another useful bloodline to combine with, he would use this form. His Wrath vampire form was still his best choice for studying the law of Wrath. Whoosh! Energy drained from Dorian's soul, roughly 35,000 points, as the various bloodlines he required combined together to form the ancestral vampire bloodline. Dorian's body transformed, becoming a handsome, slightly golden-skinned vampire. The air around him gained a heroic, noble presence, as if he was a wise, ancient warrior of old. Dorian felt his senses grow stronger, allowing him to see more of the world around him. His entire body seemed to become more attuned to itself, giving him a great sense of control. At the same time, Dorian had several alerts go off as he gained several abilities. Bat transformation, blood contract, meh. Dorian thought, tossing them to the side. The bat transformation allowed him to transform into a bat, an ability he'd actually already had from his Wrath vampire form. Blood contract allowed him to seal a blood contract with other vampire or vampire subspecies, an ability he didn't see himself using anytime soon. One ability, however, stood out to him. It was the main reason he had picked the ancestral vampire bloodline up. Ability. Exuberant grace. Exuberant grace. A natural ability akin to many of the first races that were born into existence at the start of the 30,000 worlds. This passive ability grants the user inborn grace, allowing them to move naturally with their physical form, no matter the injuries or obstructions one suffers. This ability also boosts the reaction speed and natural agility of a being. Nice, Dorian thought, nodding his head. He could feel the passive ability at work, raising his reaction speed and prowess. It also seemed like this ability would function like his great strength ability, a passive one that applied to all his forms, not just a single one. Now for the main course, he muttered, rubbing his hands together. Dorian had gained two powerful bloodlines recently. The Wise Jade Dragon bloodline and the Lightsworn Fox bloodline. His recent addition of an ancestral vampire bloodline would also affect combinations, to some degree, but the large similarities to Wrath vampires, including the fact that he had all the base forms of that bloodline, meant it wouldn't do too much. With all of this prepared, it was time to combine bloodlines. Asra, run simulations on these bloodlines. I want you to find the best combinations possible and list them for me. He mentally ordered, sitting back down on the ground. Very well, running simulations now, Asra responded and then immediately set to work. Time passed as Asra calculated intensely, taking into account millions of contrasting variables. In that time, Dorian sat calmly, meditating. I sensed two other mystical stores of energy, according to my memories. Dorian thought as he went over the intense battle inside the Ascension ruins. His Jade memory ability would not allow him to forget anything. Was that two other laws? He mused as he focused back. As he was thinking about this, recalling the sensation, Asra abruptly echoed out in his head. Simulations complete. With the latest additions, Higher class bloodlines were getting harder and harder to create, according to Asra. As long as he kept adding powerful bloodlines, it was still possible to find or create new forms. Eventually, however, some forms would no longer be able to evolve any higher and he would have to find different paths. 3 bloodlines created. Asra promptly listed them. Combining human bloodline, Wrath Vampire, Berserker Demon bloodline, Lightsworn Fox bloodline. Blood Render. Lord class, middle. Maximum energy level, 60,919. Ability. Strong constant regeneration, constant rage, moving force, Blood Berserker. Blood Renders are an extinct and brutal race of humanoids that have an insane thirst for blood. They hold incredible physical strength, able to match up against dragons blow for blow. They stand roughly 2.5 meters tall and have pitch black skin, with no visible facial features. Their arms are abnormally long, ending in long black claws. Above their head rests a crown of light, a blood-colored crown that represents the infamous ability of the Bloodrender race, Blood Berserker. When this ability is active, every injury given to any other being will increase the physical might of the Blood Render proportional to the amount of blood absorbed. The longer a fight goes on, the stronger a Blood Render will become. This race was hunted to extinction many years ago, according to legend. Combining Wise Jade Dragon bloodline, Black-Scaled Rage Dragon bloodline, Greycon bloodline, Mire Dragon bloodline, Solar Rock Lizard bloodline. Void Raptor. Lord class, late. Maximum energy level, 78,336. Ability. Constant regeneration, Void Shock, Mystic Armored Body, Great Strength. Void Raptors are a species of creatures related to various species of dragons. These agile creatures are strong and durable, tough and compact. They stand roughly 5 meters tall and possess a unique ability that allows them to create a powerful shockwave. This attack affects beings of all compositions and natures, shocking space itself, the fabric of creation. Their durable body is complemented by the Mystic Armored Body ability, an ability that covers them in a thin, almost invisible network of energy that absorbs and lowers the power of anything impacting it. Combining Berserker Demon bloodline, Wise Jade Dragon bloodline, Lightsworn Fox, Greycon bloodline, Lesser Throne Demon bloodline, Ancestral Vampire bloodline, Human bloodline. Balance Demon. Lord class, late. Maximum energy level, 84,331. Ability. Strong constant regeneration, Demonic Eyes, Body of Balance, Soul of Balance. A newly created race. Balance demons are a unique type of being that are engineered to be a focus for balance. Their unique abilities allows a balance demon to shrug off otherwise fatal attacks to the body or soul by balancing the attack out over their entire physical or soul form. They stand roughly 2 meters tall and have a natural shell of metallic and crystal armor, covering the entirety of their body. Balance demons are uniquely suited to control multiple laws of opposing natures, making them one of the few races in the 30,000 worlds that have a natural capacity to understand multiple laws. Well now, Dorian muttered as he went over the information, looking at each form intently. The first form, the Blood Render, was incredibly creepy to look at. It was similar to his Berserker Demon form in that it had the downside of the constant rage ability, meaning it would be hard to use the form at all. However, its upside was its powerful physical strength and its Blood Berserker ability. It was a powerful form, especially if Dorian needed to go all out and could afford to lose himself in his anger. But Dorian ultimately put it on hold because of that. Its abilities are unique to itself and can't be used in other forms, or they're ones I already have. It's a strong form, but I really can't stand not being in control of myself. Also, it's way too freaky. He shook his head. The impression the Berserker Demon form had left on him was not a very pleasant one. Void Raptor? He looked at the second form, nodding his head. It was an agile as well as extremely tanky creature, even coming with an ability designed to enhance a creature's defense. Oh, Mystic Armored Body is an ability I can use in any form? Dorian smiled when he saw this. Some abilities could only be used on certain forms. For example, the Blood Berserker ability was unique to the Blood Render and could not be used on any of his other forms. The Mystic Armored Body ability from the Void Raptor, however, could be used on any of his forms and wasn't locked down to just the Void Raptor. The other signature ability, Void Shock, was restricted to only the Void Raptor. Ability. Mystic Armored Body. A powerful defensive ability. The Mystic Armored Body ability creates a network of nearly invisible energy that draws on the surrounding environment, including the natural laws of the universe, to lessen the impact of energy or physical attacks. The description of the ability was rather short and didn't mention how effective it was, but Dorian could already judge that it was worth at least something. I need a stronger defense, across all my forms. This is exactly what I need. He immediately decided he would gain this form. As for the last form, the Balance Demon, the form seemed almost custom-made for Dorian, as if fate itself was helping him out. Dorian's Berserker demon form was an incredibly unstable one. When it combined with the calm and peaceful Wise Jade Dragon, the interaction of the two bloodlines seemed to balance each other out. With a few other bloodlines added to solidify the combination, the Balance Demon was born. It's definitely strong and its unique abilities will help with the two laws I'm studying, he said aloud, rubbing his chin. His Law of Valor and Law of Wrath definitely were closer to opposing than not. The Balance Demon was also a very defensively focused form. He had just been complaining about how he needed to up his defense. A body like this seemed perfect in many ways. There was only one issue. As Dorian looked at the form, he realized something. Just faintly, Dorian could see a slight resemblance between the Balance Demon and the physical form he had held in the future. The resemblance on the surface wasn't too strong, but deeper, in a sort of magical connection, Dorian could see that the two forms were definitely similar. His Balance Demon form and the form that he had used when he was destroying the 30,000 worlds were related. Just the idea of this made him hesitate. No, I have faith that I will not fall to that future. It is not a certain one, just a possibility. I will stand on my own and not give in to evil. Dorian's eyes flashed as he renewed his determination, pushing aside any fears or worries she held. Asra, evolve me into the Balance Demon and Void Raptor forms. As you command. Whoosh. You have already made a move, Duke Orbit? A cool voice echoed out in the study as a masked figure crossed eyes with the fat, slothful Duke Orbit. The figure was humanoid, with glowing blue eyes and a gold mask that had an almost samurai-like head adornment atop it. The bottom half of the gold mask was made up of some type of jagged blue crystal that matched the color of the man's eyes. He wore a set of loose, dark green leather armor, with a curved blade resting horizontally across his lower back. The man's hands glowed, blue essence floating and gleaming a few millimeters off of them, fluttering up and down his hand and forearms. He wore a set of gauntlets and gloves that helped contain this chaotic energy, but failed to hold it fully. Yes, Hallow. The Wrath Inheritor must have landed somewhere in the easternmost portion of my territory. I've already set my hunters to find and locate at least the world the Inheritor landed on. To apprehend him if possible, to open communication if not, Orbit replied, stretching his arms languidly as he looked at the threatening figure. It has been many years since a Wrath Inheritor appeared. If you were to chase him away, it would serve no one. The Destroyer has returned, as the prophecies foretold. We must prepare to annihilate him. You know as well as I that he will hunt us down and kill us all if we don't. Hallow responded, the air around him almost electric with tension. Orbit ignored this air of danger entirely, still resting on the plush leather couch as if he hadn't a care in the world. Yes, I'm aware. The so-called anomalies, right? Still, remember our last altercation with that Inheritor of Pride? He refused to join the council and nearly killed the envoy we sent. Orbit replied, shrugging as he looked down at a sheaf of papers, a report from the other members of the council. I know. The sheer arrogance of that man, leader, to ignore us and declare he was going to conquer his own world alone. Hallow shook his head. Faint particles of blue energy drifted off his arms as he spoke, dissipating into the air. He continued, that is why the rest of the council has agreed to send me. There will be no mistakes this time. Orbit snorted, his eyes flashing as he grinned. Of course, if you say so. Just don't let your envy get the best of you. My envy is saved for the heavens. Worry for yourself, Orbit. It's a wonder you aren't an inheritor of gluttony as well. Hallow cut him off, his voice as cool as ever as he stared at the fat Duke disdainfully. Duke Orbit glanced up at Hallow askance. He looked as if he was about to rebuke him before he decided it was too much effort and laid back down on the couch, simply giving the warrior a low-effort glare. Now, tell me, Orbit, before I leave. Hallow continued, his eyes narrowing. Where exactly did you last detect the Wrath Inheritor's presence? Chapter 148. New Laws. Whoosh. Dorian clenched his fists, feeling a sense of power, of raw might filling his veins. His body was covered in a hard, metallic and crystal shell, shaped like armor. He was in his balanced demon form. As he looked out at the world around him, he felt as if he could feel everything so much clearer. Especially the two laws he'd studied so far, the law of wrath and the law of valor. Dorian, soul status, soul stage. Lord class, pseudo-king. Health. Perfect. Energy. 101,878 101,878. Ha ha ha. He laughed out loud as he looked at his stats. His power had jumped enormously. The boost from upgrading his physical form to a balanced demon, plus the power he absorbed from the laws of the universe to enrich his soul, had pushed his basic energy levels to roughly the minimum requirement to reach pseudo-king class. I'm still nowhere close to reaching official king class, he noted but shrugged. To reach king class, it didn't matter how powerful your soul got. The main thing that separated the two classes was one's understanding of at least one law. Taman, the half-diamond human that studied diamond magic, had an abnormally powerful energy level, one that was equal to many king-class wizards, yet was still lord class. Actually, that's a good point. Dorian muttered, focusing. I'm studying two laws right now. The law of wrath and the law of valor. I don't have anything to guide me, but by focusing on the mystical energy that I can sense, I can slowly gain a better understanding for each. He talked his plan aloud, nodding. However, during my time in the Ascension ruins, I distinctly remember sensing two other laws, two other sources of mystic energy. Dorian's jade memory would not allow him to forget anything. Thanks to this, Dorian could accurately recall the exact type of energy and sensation each of those two laws. Dorian paused, going over the sensations. Groan. Dorian's thoughts were interrupted, however, by Helena's moans. He turned around with a worried expression, looking at the tree she was resting on. Her face was covered with a sheen of sweat. Her appearance was physically withered, as if she were much, much older. Dorian jogged over, looking down at her with concern. His heart twisted as he saw her condition, wanting nothing other than for her to be healthy. Damn it, he muttered, unhappy. If he found pills that could help treat injuries to the soul, he could speed up the healing process. But, right now, they were in the middle of who knows where. He'd already given her literally every pill he had that he thought might help, and everything in her own spatial ring as well. After a moment's thought, Dorian withdrew several sets of clothes from his spatial ring. He then gently lifted up Helena's body and spread the clothes out, forming a more comfortable makeshift bed. Next time, I'm definitely bringing pillows and blankets in my spatial ring. He nodded his head. According to Helena, several of her subordinates had tents and blankets in their spatial rings, but she herself hadn't carried anything of the sort. He softly set her body down, letting her rest. He then looked around, making sure nothing was in sight. All right, he whispered quietly as he turned around and sat at the base of the tree, his body physically guarding Helena. I need to let her rest. We can start moving and searching for somewhere to find soul healing pills later. For now, let's look into these two new laws. His eyes flashed. He had already grown much stronger, but there was no reason to stop now. He would grow as powerful as possible. Absolutely nothing would stop him anymore, not when it came to achieving his goals. Nothing. He clenched his fists before forcing himself to calm down. All right, calm down. Now, those two sources of energy. Let's focus on the first one. I first sensed this mystical source of energy when I was greedily absorbing every single artifact I could get my hands on, in an almost mad rush. Dorian's jade memory called to mind the exact moment when he felt the flow of energy. As Dorian remembered it exactly, from out of seemingly nowhere, Dorian once more felt that same sense of mystic energy. As soon as he felt it, Dorian sensed it resonate with the law of wrath. The energy was powerful and vitriolic. It was overwhelming and at the same time weak, fluctuating between the two. It gave Dorian a sense of need, a desire to take any and everything in sight and protect it as his own. Grr! Dorian's arms abruptly flashed with dark green light as the laws of the universe flowed heavily around him. His balanced demon form was uniquely suited to allow this energy to meld around him, the energy from the law of valor and law of wrath that was always present within him not clashing. I can feel it, I can sense it, he muttered aloud, concentrating fiercely. This was the power of law. The law of greed, he muttered, his eyes widening as an epiphany came upon him. The dark green light that was surrounding Dorian suddenly bursts into the air, stirring the environment around him with greedy energy. The laws of the universe seemed to fluctuate. Dorian felt his soul greedily devour this green light, almost in delight as the energy washed over him. For the third time, Dorian was experiencing a baptism of the laws of the universe. Did you feel that? A shade wearing a full set of gray-plated armor turned to his comrade as they scanned through a forest of trees, looking to his left and right. On his back was a large white sword and a set of throwing knives. Feel what, Anthone? The other shade wore an identical set of armor, with the same white sword and throwing knives on his back. Each of them wore a helmet, obscuring their facial features. I sensed something happening for a moment to Nor, distantly in that direction. Anthone said, pointing to a direction in the forest off. The other shade, Tenor, shrugged, looking in the pointed direction. Your guess is as good as mine. The Duke's got every hunter squad on alert, combing the eastern worlds. I doubt we'll be the ones to find the target, he said aloud, shrugging again. Duke Orbit, the Shadow Duke of the East, was known for his slothful and jovial nature. In terms of power and authority, however, he ruled with an iron fist. He had established his own army, with a large, spread-out force of hunter squads, stationed on every single world he controlled. Each hunter squad contained several Lord-class wizards and warriors, the minimum requirement to be accepted, and was in charge of overall enforcement of the law on any particular world. The Duke had 4 headhunters, each in charge of roughly 40 hunter squads. Each headhunter was a powerful king-class wizard, adept in magic and combat. The easternmost worlds were shielded from other dukes and foreign enemies. Largely as a result, most hunter squads weren't ideally equipped for combat beyond fighting against criminal shades or bandit gangs. Still, let's go check it out. Be prepared to send up the warning signal should we find the target. The shade's eyes flashed as he moved forward towards the disturbance. The sensation of the energy that flowed around Dorian, baptizing his soul, was incredibly enjoyable to feel. It was pure ecstasy to Dorian's mind, as if his soul had been cramped for a long time and was now stretching, becoming fully comfortable. Amazing, Dorian felt the energy keenly, sensations running through his mind. The law of greed, a law that centered around the concept of greed, a desire for something, a desperate need for something that one does not have. It was a mystic law, one that was hard to understand, one of the great 7 laws of the demon race. Dorian didn't know exactly what all the law did, not yet. He did gain an innate understanding of the basics of the law, however, knowledge flooding into his mind. The law of wrath was a full, frontal law focusing on offense. Conversely, the law of greed was similar to the law of pride. It focused on enhancing its users' strength, making them more directly powerful. However, instead of enhancing the body like the law of pride, the law of greed enhanced the soul. Whoosh! Dorian could keenly feel the law starting to take effect, the energy that flowed into his soul making it tougher and more durable, able to handle more stress and use. The law also had the side effect of strengthening his mentality and mental toughness. A more powerful soul was associated with a stronger personality and a more powerful will, though this wasn't always the case. The law of greed was the chosen law for wizards of the demon race, making them able to handle stronger spells in addition to strengthening their normal spells. The baptism of the law of greed finished its main effects in a few short moments, similar to how the baptism from the law of wrath had taken place. Dorian, however, chose to focus on its effects for several minutes, feeling the powerful energy run through him and help him understand the law more. Finally, after several minutes, Dorian pulled his focus away from the law of greed. He now sent his jade memory back once more, centering on the memory of the other law he had sensed. I might as well do both right now. He nodded. His memories showed him a scene where he was looking on as Ariel bravely sacrificed her life to gravely injure Veritos, blocking Dorian and protecting him. She gave up everything to save him. In that moment, as she faced death, she had truly repented for the wrongs she had committed. Dorian was not her judge, nor her arbiter. But upon seeing that, his heart had stirred. Without a shred of hesitation, Dorian forgave her for her betrayal and leaving him for dead. And right there, as that moment passed, Dorian had sensed a source of mystical energy. A law. Dorian called to mind that specific feeling once more, using his jade memory to great effect. And, once more, he found that source of mystical energy appear in his senses. Dorian immediately put his focus on it, like he had for the law of greed. Bright blue light flashed around Dorian as energy from this mystical source appeared and flowed around his arms. This energy was a cool, formidable type of energy, filling his mind and soul with a sense of righteous strength. It boiled with power but held its calm at the same time. Knowledge flooded into Dorian's mind as he realized what law this was. The law of mercy, a concept that centered around forgiving an enemy or target of their transgressions and sparing them, showing them benevolence and forgiveness. A complex law that was known by very few. In fact, in the entire 30,000 worlds, the only current group that had active practitioners of the law of mercy were some of the cloistered holy monasteries in the western half of the 30,000 worlds, within the Boral autarky. It's like the law of wrath, Dorian muttered around as he came to an epiphany. Like the law of wrath, the law of mercy was a law that focused on attack power. It granted the user's attacks powerful strength and impact, enhancing his spells or strikes. Whoosh! Energy gathered around Dorian once more as the laws of the universe reacted. And, once more, for the second time within the past hour, and the fourth time in total, Dorian experienced a baptism of the laws of the universe. This time, the local area where Dorian was resting seemed to come alive with energy. While a single baptism of the laws would only have a short effect on the surroundings, a second one happening right after the first caused the entire environment to fluctuate with energy. These waves of energy were hard to detect by even powerful experts due to their abstruse nature. Unless one practiced the same law that baptism was for, they would not be easily detected. However, anyone that was within the vicinity of the effect would still sense something odd. As Dorian sat, concentrating intently on soaking in the feeling for the law of mercy, he completely missed a few movements in the forest a few hundred meters away. I'm telling you, Sner, I really think I felt something. Something that affected the nearby world through the laws of the universe. Anthone led Sner forward as they jogged through the trees. They had been running for several minutes now, headed towards a specific direction. Well, I've felt nothing. Sner responded, the gray armor he wore jostling uncomfortably as he continued. And honestly, we've only been searching for a day. There's no chance that we fi. Just as he was continuing, however, the other shade held up a fist, silencing Sner. Quiet, I can sense it again. Right there. Anthone broke into a sprint as he dashed into a small clearing, his eyes wide. A powerful, Lord-class aura full of darkness burst around him as he charged at a spot just beyond the clearing. Sner ran behind, another aura of darkness flowing around him as he followed. A pair of throwing knives appeared in his hand as his eyes grew steely, ready to attack if need be. Their orders were to subdue their target if possible. The description of the target had been scant. They were only told that the hunter's sigil that each hunter wore around their neck would glow brightly when they found him or her. Whoosh! The baptism for the law of mercy was even faster than the one for the law of greed. Unlike greed, the law of mercy sank into his soul quickly with little fanfare, not powering it up too much. As an attacking law, it could only slowly add to the strength of his soul as his understanding of it grew. Dorian let the feeling of the law flow over him, however, reveling in the ecstasy he felt each time he experienced this. It was incredibly pleasurable and almost indescribably enjoyable. In the midst of this, however, Dorian felt more than heard movement happening, just in front of him. He frowned, just barely able to shift enough of his attention away to open his eyes. The tree line in front of him was rustling as something or someone moved through it, heading right towards him. The creature covered the distance in an instant, moving at a breakneck speed. Dorian's eyes widened as he saw this. He kept the epiphany of the law of mercy still fresh in his mind, however, not wanting to waste any of the experience, keeping his main focus on the law. The creature burst from the tree line into view. Huh? It's right here. Anthone leapt forward, drawing the large sword on his back as he ran past one last tree, going on guard. The air around him fluctuated with power as his aura burst forth without pause. Sner landed on the ground right behind him, throwing daggers at the ready as the duo looked at a being lying on the ground right in front of them. Dorian stared at the creature that had come into view. Is that a deer? An odd being appeared in Dorian's eyesight. A deer that appeared to be made out of green grass, with a mane composed of some type of pink plant, and horns made out of the stalk of roses, ending with the various heads of roses that dripped nectar made of light onto the ground around it. A majestic, unusual-looking being. In his head, Asra identified the creature for him. This appears to be a solar garden deer, an organism composed of various types of mystical plants that have come to life through the mystical laws of the universe, transforming into a single, homogeneous being. Huh, Dorian stared at it. Anthone looked down at what was before him in disappointment, his aura retracting. He then turned and exchanged glances with a grinning Tenor. Well, it looks like you found something. Anthone glared at Tenor and then turned around in frustration. Come on, let's keep looking. Tenor laughed as he turned around too, shaking his head as he took one last glance behind him. At where a large, Grandmaster-class grass pig had just given birth to a set of triplets. Grass pigs were a rare beast found in the forest they were searching, especially those at the Grandmaster class. This current pig was glaring at the two shades that had just burst into view, its hackles raised as it snarled at them, covering up its newborn young. Ha ha ha, you know what, Anthone, there is one thing I think we've learned from this. Tenor said as he jogged away from the pig, catching up to his friend. Yeah? Anthone grunted in response. It's just like your marriage. Tenor said, still grinning. Go on. Anthone's voice was dangerously calm. You've got quite the eye for finding pigs. You bastard. The deer was most likely drawn here by the fluctuations in the world around you from your law baptisms. Fluctuations like this more commonly appear from the appearance of natural treasures or rare magic herbs, or when powerful beasts with soul spell matrices at the Grandmaster class or above give birth. Oh, well, that's a relief. I thought someone that was hunting us might have found us or something. Dorian muttered out loud, his heart calm. I guess that would be far too convenient, though, huh? He shrugged. As he looked back at the deer, he noticed that there was a large, black arrow pierced into its back. This arrow seemed to have badly injured the deer, shot by someone hunting it. The deer took a few more jogging steps towards Dorian before finally slipping and tumbling down, falling to the ground dead. The deer must have spent the last of its energy trying to reach the energy fluctuations Dorian was giving off. Dorian looked at it with pity but shook his head. He could not save everyone in existence. If he tried to save the life of every squirrel and spider, every human and ethman that he found, he would make it nowhere. Oi Salma, its tracks lead here, keep chasing it, Jaisal. The deer should be close to death. In the background, Dorian heard two youthful voices call out, yelling to each other. His eyes flashed. It seemed he would still be meeting someone after all. Chapter 149. Come back. Whenever Dorian evolved into a new, stronger form, his energy level would rise. In terms of added strength, the rise would not be purely linear, however. A part of the energy level that any bloodline reached for natural growth consisted of energy devoted to increasing the strength of one's soul spell matrix. For Dorian, whose soul spell matrix was already very strong, most of that energy would have little effect. Thus, while he gained a significant amount of strength from gaining his balanced demon form, the increase was not a direct addition of the demon's energy level. Slowly, but surely, Dorian was growing his physical form towards one of the strongest in existence, without counting laws or law energy. Dorian's eyes narrowed as he looked at the dead solar garden deer. Most of his focus was still on reveling in the law energy and the remnants of the baptism of the laws he had experienced, taking in every bit of energy he could. Therefore, he remained still, unmoving as he leaned against a tree. A.N. Capitalizing baptism from now on. Thud thud. The sounds of feet pounding on dirt rang out as first one, and then a second, figure burst into view. Two youths wearing brown leather hides, each armed with a fine-looking bow that appeared to be made out of metal. Species. Shade. Class. Sky class. Maximum energy level. 31. Species. Shade. Class. Sky class. Maximum energy level. 33. Dorian stared at them. Wow. Energy levels of 33 and 31? Was I that pitifully weak at one point? Dorian shook his head. The Shade race bloodline could grow, naturally, to Sky class. To grow beyond that, however, one needed to study a mystic martial art or study magic. Salma, we got it. The first of the two youths looked slightly readier than the other, with short brown hair and pale green eyes. The dark essence that floated off his hands, the telltale sign of the shade race, rose slowly in the air. Nice. Solar garden deer may be weak, but they can sell for a ton at the normal auction. We'll make enough off this to live like kings for at least a month. The other youth jumped up and down in joy as he ran up to the corpse. Dorian studied them quietly, still immersed in the feeling of the law of mercy, and residually, the law of greed. The two boys quickly trussed up the corpse with a set of sticks and ropes, instead of putting it in any type of spatial ring or pouch. Their movements were quick and practiced, as if they had done this many times before. They also, he noted with amusement, completely failed to notice the heavily armored balance demon that was leaning against a tree just a couple dozen meters away, meditating. The duo promptly began to leave. Whoosh! The air around Dorian stirred slightly. The law of mercy caused a very short baptism of the laws of the universe. Dorian finished it completely then, gaining all he could by active focus and meditation. Status. He called to mind his status, eager to check his progress. Dorian, soul status, soul stage. Lord class, pseudo-king. Health. Perfect. Energy. 138,825 162,112. He grinned, clenching his fists with excitement. His efforts had borne fruit. His energy level now well exceeded the typical norm for a pseudo-king class fighter or wizard, moving into the range of the abnormal ones like Vicehead Taman. And with 4 different laws to draw upon to power his soul, Dorian had no intention of stopping that growth. Laws were the bedrock of power in this universe. Dorian had realized that firmly as he saw stronger and stronger beings carrying with them unbelievable strength. The only person I know that studied multiple laws is the Demon Emperor. From the memories he used to have, Dorian had become aware that Ukeli had sensed multiple laws, but only chose to fully use and study the law of the Absolute. According to legend, the Demon Emperor mastered all 7 of the 7 great laws of the demon race. This made him a nearly unstoppable force of nature that required the efforts of the greatest geniuses in the universe to defeat. No one actually knew the real details of that final battle, only that the 5 great heroes had proven victorious, but promptly afterward, 2 of the 5, Osra and Kaladin, had disappeared. Well, Osra didn't just disappear. Ukeli killed her. Dorian mentally corrected himself, his eyes dark. Anyway, I'm kind of on a similar path to the Demon Emperor, aren't I? Dorian realized, not sure how much he liked that idea. I'm also studying several laws that are part of the 7 laws of the demon race. I'm also studying several contrasting laws. I guess you could say they are opposites of the 7 great laws of the demon race. If the 7 laws of the demon race are the 7 sins like they seem to be, then these would be the 7 virtues. He rubbed his chin, processing the thought. Well, laws are just a tool. He shrugged. Just because I am using a law that centers around a sin does not mean I am evil. It is the choices you make that prove what you are, not your abilities. He nodded sharply. I will always try to do the right thing. In this universe, I will fail at that unless I have power. His eyes narrowed. And the path to power? I see it. He grinned fiercely. Not even you can stop me now, Ukeli. His eyes flashed as he made a mental resolution. Whoosh! The air around him shivered as he thought that, as if him making that promise had an impact on fate itself. Still, with that said, what should I do now? Dorian glanced off to the side, where the 2 shade boys were weaving through the trees, still in eyesight. They appeared to be painfully oblivious to the fluctuating energy around Dorian. He said aloud, tapping on a ring he wore. In his spatial ring, Dorian still had 1 pill left that he had yet to use on Helena. His shorn soul repair pill. It was a pill he had originally planned on using on Will's soul in case of an emergency when he was trying to repair it, but hadn't ended up needing due to being able to use Veritos' body. The pill drew heavily on the energy of the surrounding world, forcibly healing a soul that was injured. It operated quickly, taking little time to function. The downside of the pill was that it had negative side effects, according to the alchemist that had made it for him, Lord Rue. It could repair a soul quickly, but by doing so, damage the ability of that soul to sense the laws of the universe for years. It was the price the pill paid to grant ultra-fast regeneration of the soul. The side effects went away, eventually, with time, according to Lord Rue. And, for Dorian, it had sounded ideal at the time. He would only use the pill if it looked like he was going to fail and needed to protect Will's soul. He didn't think Will would complain, considering how he would be dead otherwise. For Helena, however, such a repair could cripple her ability to use her law of might for years to come. That wasn't something Dorian wanted to have happen. Lord Rue mentioned the negative side effects could be mitigated if I obtained a Lord-class healing bell pill, though. Dorian muttered quietly, his eyes flashing. Perhaps it wasn't such a bad idea to mingle with other beings after all. Dorian stood up, shaking out his body. He felt strong. He was strong. He turned and jumped, landing on a nearby branch of the tree that was holding Helena. He looked down at her resting form, sleeping on a makeshift bed created out of folded-up clothes. He frowned. She deserved much better. His eyes roamed her resting form. Even with the disfigured wrinkles and withered appearance, Dorian still thought she looked beautiful. The corner of her lips was upturned in a smile, and he could feel that fierce, proud nature. He reached out but then stopped, looking at his armored, clawed fingers. He frowned again as he stared at this and then back at her. He sighed. Asra, I still have a shade bloodline stored, correct? He queried. Yes. Asra gave a terse and short reply. Evolve me into a shade. Whoosh. Hup. Careful now, Dove. Dorian carried Helena carefully, balancing her body on his arms as he walked through the forest. He followed the trail of the two shade boys that had been out hunting, carrying their prized carcass. He bore the appearance of a normal human, for the most part, save for two dark points on the top of his hands. He was a shade. Shade. Sky class. Maximum energy level. 36. Ability. Weak dark sense, weak shadow sense. The shade race is a mere shadow of the greater, Shadwar race. They are a lesser subrace that holds none of the powerful abilities that made the Shadwar one of the greatest ancient races in the 30,000 worlds, and a contender against the ancestral vampires for rule tens of thousands of years ago. The shade race completes their natural growth at the sky class. They possess a weak but innate ability to use shadow and dark magic. The shade race also possesses a unique characteristic known as a dark point on the top of each wrist. For practitioners of shadow or dark magic, this dark point can enhance the power of either type of magic significantly if used as the focus for a spell. As a result of their affinity for dark and shadow magic, shade blood is black in color. Not the most useful class for me, but whatever. At least it was cheap to upgrade fully. He shrugged. I got you. I got you. Dorian muttered quietly as he put his full focus on keeping Helena safe. His running and jumping through the forest was controlled and quiet. He made sure to move in smooth motions, not risking her being jostled. Helena slept peacefully, snuggled up against Dorian's chest as he moved forward. Dorian had drawn up a rough game plan for the future. First, he needed to figure out where he was. Right now, seeing as he found two shade boys randomly hunting in a forest, he figured he was near or within the shade commune. But how deep? He thought, slightly worried. Hopefully it wasn't too far. After all, the shade commune was at war with the vampire families, as Dorian had learned. Even worse, Dorian had beat up and almost truly killed the Holy Prince of the Church of Light, someone that was an extremely important figure to the shade race. If they found out he was here, well, it was best to avoid that. After I find out where we are, I'll decide what to do from there. I either need to hurry up and escape to safer lands, or search for a Lord-class healing bell pill or some other pill that can help heal the soul. If he was close enough to the Aurelius family-controlled worlds, he would just leave for them immediately. They would be able to treat and heal Helena, and would likely spare no expense. It all depends on where you two lead me. His eyes flashed as he focused back on the present, looking at the two boys that were hurrying through the forest. Shades grew older and matured, at a slower rate than humans, with an average lifespan ranging from 200 to 300 years of age. This didn't take into account how having a stronger soul meant you could live for hundreds or even thousands of years longer than normal, but only considered the average of regular people. The two boys must have been, in human terms, 16 or 17 years old. Not yet men, but old enough to take care of themselves. They quickly moved through the forest, following a slightly worn trail. The forest wasn't thick, yet Dorian discovered there was a myriad of flora and fauna moving about. He saw several grass deer, silver oak boars, and a few other species that all looked quite unique. At the least, not like anything he had ever seen before. All the creatures here seem to be related to plants somehow. Can I absorb a plant? Can I become a plant? Dorian paused for a moment as he looked at one of the large oak trees that dominated this forest. Yes, you can absorb certain species of plants that have gained sentience and possess a soul spell matrix. Asra cut into his thoughts, informing him. Oh, good to know. He hadn't even really considered it. Maybe there were some weird trees or flowers out there with unique abilities that could help him. Even weak creatures can have useful or unique abilities. I should cycle through my old, unused bloodlines and see if there is anything there I might like. He made a mental note of it, deciding he'd look into it when he got free time. Finally, after 15 more minutes of travel, with Dorian's thoughts rambling all over the place, they arrived at a clearing where the forest ended. A large, spread-out grass plain extended beyond the forest. A long, earthen road could be seen leading to the forest. The two youths began jogging down this path, moving at a fast pace. Dorian stalked and followed them, staying several hundred meters away. With his powerful senses, as a pseudo-king class expert, he could still easily keep track of them. Minutes slipped away as the youths traveled forward. Soon, Dorian could make out a set of city walls in the distance, towering a dozen meters high. The path they were traveling had a few other shades moving on it. Most of them appeared in similar wear as the shade youths, obviously all hunters. After a couple more minutes of travel, with those great walls growing large in the background, the boys' easy travel was interrupted. Oh, now what do we have here? A gruff, grouchy voice echoed out as a trio of shades noticed the duo carrying their deer down the road. The leader of the trio was a taller, athletic-looking shade that carried himself with authority. He wore a set of simple, plain leather armor, similar to what the two boys wore. Behind him were two slightly overweight shades dressed in fine-looking white silk. Despite the difference in attire, the two overweight shades clearly followed the younger, leather armor-clad shade. Species: Shade. Class: Master Class. Maximum energy level: 61. Oh, he's Master Class. Dorian noted. For a shade, that meant he had practiced magic or, more likely from his appearance, a mystic martial art enough to upgrade his soul spell matrix. The increase in energy level was nearly double the boys, but in physique, a Master Class shade would be much stronger than a regular Sky Class shade. Still, anything before Grandmaster Class wouldn't have touched upon true strength, not yet. Darvo, we already paid our dues to the guild, just like last time. The speaker was the slightly reedier shade youth, Jaisal. This was, apparently, a regular occurrence for the two youths. Dorian frowned when he saw it, but didn't take action. He couldn't take care of everyone. And besides, it wasn't like he had full knowledge of the situation. Perhaps the guild here was one that provided real benefits or protection in return for whatever dues the kids paid. Yes, you two have. I'm aware. I commend you for supporting the local economy, Darvo said as he walked forward, his eyes shining as he looked at the strung-up deer and continued. But what is this, here? Is that a solar garden deer? His voice was full of interest. The other shade youth, Salma, stepped in front of the body of the deer, blocking Darvo's vision. Guild rules state you can't interfere with members of the guild on business. We hunted this deer fair and square, so buzz off. Salma crossed his arms imperiously. The reedy-looking Jaisal nodded, crossing his arms in solidarity. That they do, but we aren't in guild territory, no? I usually check for dues outside the city proper, we're still several miles distant from that. Running into you two must have been a random twist of fate. Darvo smiled in a pleased manner, clapping his hands together. Dorian, in the background, turned and whistled to himself guiltily, looking away as if he had nothing to do with this. Damn it, soul, you cause enough trouble for me. Don't just bring trouble to random people as well. He had no doubt that his soul was at fault for this. And out here in the wilds, the mighty rule, while the weak give way. Darvo's body blurred as he jumped forward, grabbing a hold of the shade youth named Salma. Dorian's eyes flashed darkly when he heard that expression, sounding very similar to something he'd heard Ariel say, in what felt like so long ago. He frowned, instantly making a decision. If I save those two boys, I should be able to get reliable information and have two temporarily allies in this strange land. Energy flowed around his arms, crackling as he put his full focus on what was in front of him. I don't have to show off my full strength. But I also don't need to hide anymore. He smiled coldly. I am no longer weak like I used to be. I can face threats head on. Dorian leapt forward, swinging his arms into a guard position as he appeared, roughly a dozen meters away from the two shades. An air of justice appeared around him, as if he was a brave knight doing a good deed. Unhand those youths, foul villain. I'll have you know that this godly shade shall. Oh my God, Helena, no, I'm so sorry. Dorian's monologue cut off as his eyes widened, realizing he had forgotten something. He instantly hurled his body forward at full strength as he spun about. Perfect body, activate, energy from the law of valor, quickly. Thundering winds. Flush gale. Dorian unleashed his full strength as he dived head first towards the ground. Specifically towards the body of Helena that he had accidentally forgotten he was holding when he jumped forward. As he swung his arms, he had inadvertently tossed her off to the side and up into the air. He had been so completely focused on the situation at hand that he hadn't noticed. Boom! A small crater formed in the ground as Dorian smashed down onto the grass plain, just barely managed to catch the still sleeping Helena. Dirt and rock debris fluttered into the air, grass flying about as a small burst of wind shot out at the impact. Hey, are you okay? Dorian heaved a huge sigh of relief as he looked at her, noting that she seemed to be in the same condition as before, her health unchanged by his lapse. Did you notice that at all? He whispered quietly, eyeing her. Helena didn't react. Dorian carried her carefully, using his left hand to wipe a sheen of sweat of his forehead. The dark essence that rose off the dark point on his wrist blinded him temporarily, something he would have to get used to. Dorian then turned his focus back to the now stunned group of shades. They were all staring at him as if he was insane. He stared back, this time glaring. None of you saw that, do you hear me? I absolutely did not throw her into the air and almost drop her. The air around him rippled intimidatingly with power from the law of valor. All of the shades stood frozen, staring at Dorian in mute terror. They nodded back quietly. Good, good. Dorian smiled in a satisfied manner. Oh, right, where was I? He gathered his bearings. Once more, a proud, justice-full demeanor appeared and wrapped around him once more. Ahem. He coughed and then yelled aloud mightily. Unhand those. Oh, you're not holding them anymore. Well, he cut himself off lamely as he noticed that the martial artist shade had let go of the youth hunter, backing up several steps. He rubbed his chin, looking down as he tried to think of a response. I got it. He snapped his fingers, looking back up with a smile. Do you dare to hey? Wait, hold on. Dorian sputtered aloud as he looked at his charges. Don't run away. I wasn't finished. Come back. He yelled aloud as he saw the youth hunters and the martial artist and his two goons sprinting away at full speed. The two youths kept hold of their deer corpse loot, their bodies shaking with exertion as they fled, while the martial artist shade ran adeptly, his movements smooth. Damn it, I'm not done with you. Get back here. Dorian began to chase them, running slowly as to not jostle Helena awake. Chapter 150. My name. Thank you, Mr. Thank you very much. Too nervous, but no longer terrified, youthful voices rang out as the two young shades bowed their heads towards Dorian. It's nothing. Sorry for the misunderstanding. Y'all get out of here. Dorian waved them and their thanks off, turning his attention towards the city walls in front of him. The duo quickly scampered off, still holding their Solar Garden deer prize. So I'm in the country of Platera, he muttered. That doesn't help me much. After everyone fled from him, Dorian had eventually managed to chase down the two youths, while running carefully with Helena. It had taken some convincing, but he'd managed to win them over and explain himself. After he gave them a couple of the few magic herbs he still had remaining, the youths had been beside themselves with sharing any relevant info they had. Dorian's magic stretching clothes had the appearance of fine silk garments, making him appear as a wealthy noble or merchant, perhaps one lost in his travels to the boys. The two hunters didn't actually know what planet they were on. In fact, all they knew was that he was in the country of Platera, right outside one of the fort cities that dotted the landscape of the nation. It wasn't too surprising given their status as lowly hunters. Platera was supposed to be a large, sweeping semi-nation that took up an entire half of a large continent. The fort cities were the place where most people live and were mostly independent, with everything else swarming with wildlife. Most of the creatures in Platera appeared to be related to plants or flowers, or other types of flora. While the boys didn't know anything about other planets or world bridges, they did know that the local area was one almost completely inhabited by shades. I'm definitely within the shade commune. If Dorian hadn't been sure before, he was certain now. He sighed with frustration, worry filling him. Dorian kept his thoughts to himself as he moved towards the fort city ahead of him, a large city known as Fort Sner. The walls were stark gray, perfectly flat with almost no visible cracks. As Dorian got closer to the city, more and more shades could be seen moving about. This road seemed to lead only to the large forest he had just left, with mostly hunters or gatherers moving back and forth. Dorian felt pressure appear on his arm, causing him to glance down. Helena was grabbing a hold of him measuredly, her withered appearance full of concern and care. "It'll be okay." Her voice was weak as she tried to comfort him, her head shifting slightly as she tried to nod at him. "Hey, you're awake. How are you feeling?" Dorian's eyes lit up as he saw this, giving her a warm smile. They were still some distance from the city walls and no other shades were currently near them. "Okay, well, actually," she paused, her face scrunching up. "My body feels kind of sore? As if I got tossed around or something." She looked up at Dorian questioningly. "Nope, no idea about that, must be the cold weather." Dorian shrugged innocently, a sheen of sweat covering his forehead as he gestured at the world around them. It was warm and sunny. "Alright, so, moving on," he began, quickly changing the subject. "We've touched down in a hardly ideal spot." Dorian quickly explained everything he'd learned so far as he continued to walk. After taking it all in, Helena frowned with him, worry filling her face. "I don't recognize this nation either. My artifact was supposed to take us to Tomo City, like I said. When space fractured at the Ascension ruins, we must have fallen into one of those fractures." Helena's eyes lit up as she spoke, as if everything made sense now. The energy particulate that the Capitoline Wolf bracelet gives off must have interacted with chaotic space, causing a sunder field of energy to surround and protect us. That explains the enormous feeling of drain I felt and the constant attacks, as well as the support you provided. Helena's eyes filled with realization. Right, yes, of course. A sunder field. Dorian nodded sagely, rubbing his chin as if he, too, understood what she was getting at. "But you're right." Helena bit her lip, even knowing that, it doesn't help us. Abruptly, Helena's body shifted as she tried to stand up. A faint aura of energy began to form for just a second before immediately dissipating as she collapsed back into Dorian's arms, her face growing pale. "Whoa, Helena, easy." Dorian cautioned her as he pulled her in, looking at her sternly. "I'll handle all of this, all right? You just rest. I got this." His voice was commanding as he stared into her eyes, brooking no argument. She stared back, emotion fluctuating in them. A few seconds passed as they looked at each other. "All right." Helena relaxed fully, allowing Dorian to carry her freely as she let her weakened body rest. "I'll let you handle this." Her voice was a quiet whisper, full of trust, as she slipped back into unconsciousness, her body fully focused on healing itself. Dorian looked down at her sleeping form and then up at the city walls. He then looked around at the other shades walking in the distance and gulped slightly. "Right, I will handle this." He nodded firmly. In almost no time Dorian found himself in a short line, waiting to get into the city. The shades in front of him all wore leather or linen clothes, bearing swords or bows. Dorian did stand out quite a bit, carrying Helena's wrapped-up body in his arms. Well, it's not a bad thing standing out, actually. For the entirety of his time here in the 30,000 worlds, Dorian had done his best to remain low-key and avoid drawing too much attention to himself. He knew he was being hunted. Now, however, as he was in the midst of enemy territory, Dorian decided to take a slightly different approach. "Everyone is expecting me to be low-key. After all, what is the last thing you would expect someone you were hunting or searching for to do?" His eyes flashed. "Stand out." It was finally Dorian's turn in line. The gate that Dorian had stood in line for was large, at least 5 meters high and a dozen meters wide. Dorian could see several thick metal bars set to fall down in the middle of the gate, blocking it off at a moment's notice. Beyond the entrance, Dorian could make out a bustling town. Thousands of shades moving in the streets, to and fro. Most of them wore leather hides or plain linen clothes, similar to the hunters that were moving out from the gate. This appeared to be a relatively poorer district. The few buildings that Dorian could see were all made of aged brown wood, a few with broken glass windows or worn-out doors. He could also see a few kids running around, however, and the area seemed to have a lively feel. Name and purpose. A demanding voice caught Dorian's attention. One of the 6 guards that stood at the entrance of this gate. All shades, like everyone else Dorian could see. Each guard wore a set of gray iron armor, plated and worn, with a short sword at their waist and a shield on their back. This particular guard seemed to be the one in charge of the gate, his armor adorned with a large, yellow circle. The guard that was talking to Dorian looked at him with a rather bored expression, his eyes almost glazed over. As he saw that Dorian was carrying a body, however, the bored expression vanished, becoming alert. Dorian took a deep breath. My name is Inigo Montoya, from the far lands of Spain. I have traveled far to this kingdom bearing the body of my lover, a princess of Florin. Dorian's voice boomed out with authority, rich power flowing from his words as he spoke. The air around him swirled as he put his focus on twisting fate, to make himself seem as noble and authoritative as possible. My purpose is to seek out medicine to treat injuries to the soul and to save my wife. She has fallen into a deep, magic sleep from which nothing can wake her. My journey shall end only when she walks freely again. He finished speaking, waving grandly, making sure this time to not drop Helena, as he looked back at the guard to see his response. Every single one of the 6 guards had turned to stare at him in shock. In their eyes, Dorian appeared as a noble, devout shade hero from legend. His fine clothes and powerful appearance gave him the air of a ruler on a quest to save his love. The image stirred the heart and minds of the shade guards. My deepest apologies, my lord. All who come in peace are welcome in the fort city of Sner. The guard bowed his head quickly, his body shaking. Dorian turned his head as he looked at the guard, his face suddenly incredulous. Don't tell me, you have not heard of the King of the Sword, Inigo Montoya? Son of the greatest swordcrafter in the 30,000 worlds? The black shade of 7 blades? My name has not spread to this corner of the glorious commune? Dorian sputtered as he spoke, incredulity filling his voice. He twisted fate hard at the same time, focusing on the guard in front of him. Dorian also pulled on his law of valor, a heroic, powerful aura bursting forth around him. This new aura merged with his already heroic image, raising the onlooking guard's opinion of him even higher. Yes, of course, Lord Inigo. Your name and fame have spread far and wide. It is this foolish guard's fault for being blind. The guard smacked his forehead and bowed again, quickly stepping aside. At the same time, he waved urgently with his other hand to one of the guards. Ponto, immediately inform the Lord Gabito of Lord Inigo's arrival. Make full haste, do not delay at all. The head guard ordered one of his subordinates. Yes sir, Captain Tobagan. Right away. The other guard raced off, rushing through the crowd towards a large castle that was set towards the center of the city. The guard's movements were smooth and agile, at the masterclass level. Please, Lord Inigo, a million apologies. We were unaware of your greatness arriving today. The city lord will be informed shortly. The guard's voice was nasal as he flattered Dorian, motioning for him to step into the guardroom off to the side, bowing his head again. The poor guard looked so worried and concerned that Dorian actually felt bad for him. Dorian's eyes flashed arrogantly as he followed the guard, the powerful aura that flowed around him fading slightly as he smiled, however, maintaining his disguise. Don't worry, Helena, he thought, feeling confident. I got this. Meanwhile, within the city lord's castle, at the center of Fort Sner, 2 shades could be seen arguing with each other in a dining room. It's not my fault we're supposed to comb every population center, Gavin. It's from the bigwigs of the commune, we can't exactly say no. Besides, we don't even have to apprehend the vampire if they're too strong. Just crush the sigil, a female shade said as she looked at her comrade with frustration. She wore a long, gray robe emblazoned with the insignia of the Church of Light. Around her, a holy aura seemed to rest. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with long brown hair and gray eyes. I know that, Patricia. Gavin replied, shaking his head back. Gavin wore a similar set of slim gray robes, also emblazoned with the sun insignia that represented the Church of Light. He looked slightly older, in his mid-30s, rubbing at a large staff that was hooked onto his back. I just don't understand why it matters in the Eastern worlds. This is the 10th city we've searched in as many days. What are the chances? The shade abruptly cut himself off, turning around with a smile as another shade entered the dining hall. Greetings, Lord Gabito. Good afternoon, Lord Gabito. The two wizards from the Church of Light nodded at the city lord. Ah, greetings, great wizards. The city lord was a jovial-looking shade, bearing a calm but steady aura of strength. To be a city lord in any of the fort cities on Platera required at least some degree of strength. The country was full of powerful beasts, but also full of powerful magic herbs and rare natural treasures. The city lord had a long sword strapped to his back and wore a relaxed pair of gray silk pants and a white silk shirt. He appeared middle-aged, with a strong chin and a slim build. I was just about to ask you too about your stay. Have you finished scanning the city proper? Lord Gabito's voice may have been warm, but his eyes showed steel as he looked at the two wizards, apparently displeased with their presence. The Church of Light was revered and loved by the populace, but figures like Lord Gabito preferred to rule their own lands without bending knee to others. It took a man with a powerful will to rule over the lives of the nearly 5 million shades that lived in Fort Sner. Yes, Lord Gabito, we should be on our way soon. We didn't find any vampires within the city. Patricia replied, her words cool. The orders had come down several weeks ago, from both the Duke of the East and the Church, to scour the land and apprehend any vampires living within the commune. Another war had broken out with the vampires, and while it had little effect on the worlds as far to the east as their current one, it didn't mean the worlds could ignore it entirely. Patricia reached into her breast's pocket, pulling out a small, green crystal that was emblazoned with markings. If there were any within range, this bloodline crystal would have started glowing after we completed the ceremony. Patricia cut herself off as she stared at the rock, her voice trailing off. The crystal was currently glowing. Huh? Both wizards stared at the bloodline crystal in shock. Lord Gabito looked on, his face scrunched up as well. At that exact moment, just as he was about to say something, a guard burst into the chamber, his chest heaving. Lord Gabito, the famed swordmaster Lord Inigo Montoya has arrived at the Western Forest Gate.